Good evening. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. Welcome to the May budget meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. Before we get to the call for tonight's meeting, we do have some administrative matters. Nancy Burke, District 2.
Please all rise in memory of William C. Anderson, who was a member of our RTM from May 14th to, from 2000 to 2004, whereas Chief Bill Anderson served RTM District 2 and was an alternate on the Budget Overview Committee. He died about a year ago on May 21st, 2011. When Bill left the RTM in 2004, he never lost interest and apparently enjoyed watching our town meetings on Channel 79 from the comfort of his home. Some history about Bill. Bill was a Navy man, a submariner who later cooked brunch for veterans and their families in Groton, Connecticut. He joined the Greenwich Police Department in 1970 and became Chief of Police in 1986. When he retired from the police department in 1990, he was appointed United States Marshal for the District of Connecticut by President George H.W. Bush and served for 3.5 years in this capacity. Just a week before his death, Bill was awarded the Brother Arthur A. Loftus Award for Outstanding Achievement in Criminal Justice by Iona College, his alma mater. Bill was a fine person and served this country, the state, and our town well. He was not only a member of the Greenwich RTM, but was also on the board of the Boys and Girls Club of Greenwich and of the Greenwich Council of the Boy Scouts of America. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the entire membership of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting join in honoring Chief William C. Anderson for his exemplary and productive life. We extend our sympathy to the entire Anderson family, now seated in the back, to Bill's wife, Elaine Bush Anderson, and to their 3 sons, Christian, married to Laura, Matthew, and Brian. Bill was very proud of his 3 sons, who go on to uphold his legacy of service to their communities in many ways, such as by being voluntary firefighters. Be it further resolved that this resolution be set forth in the minutes of this meeting and that a copy be prepared by the town clerk and sent to his family. Thank you.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence in memory of Police Chief Bill Anderson. Thank you very much. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our April 9 meeting, the reading of the minutes will be omitted. I do have one noted correction to those draft minutes on page 6. Towards the top of the page, it says the moderator announced that item number 11 on the call was, and then the following word says not, that should read now, was now before the meeting. So that change will be made. Are there any other proposed corrections to our draft minutes? Hearing none, and absent objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. All right. Before I get into our call, I again would like to announce that we are expecting a motion to delete the MISA funding to be debated tonight, and there are speaker sign-up lists on the table as you enter the auditorium and at the front of the hall. So all speakers are encouraged to put their name on that list, and absent some time limitation that may come into play, I will do my best to preserve your right to be heard tonight if you are on that list. That now brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. The first two items are procedural. May we have the resolution on item number 1? Mr. Wells, Chairman of our Legislative and Rules Committee, are you? Mr. Bergweger, Vice Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee, will present that.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, resolve that the time to speak at the May RTM be limited to 3 minutes per speaker for each motion, except that the proponent and principal opponent for the motion, the latter to be determined by the moderator, shall be entitled to speak for 10 minutes each, and the committee reports shall be limited to 7 minutes, except the Finance and Education Committees.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second, and is now currently before us. Mr. Bergweger with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
On Monday, May 7, the Legislative and Rules Committee met at 8 o'clock in the Evaristo Room in Town Hall. All districts were present except District 1 and District 5. Our vote on this resolution was 10-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 1. Since this is a procedural issue, I will call for a voice vote. Those who are in favor of this should vote aye. All those in favor of the limit on debate contained in item number 1, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item has carried. Item number 2 now comes before us. Once again, Kip Bergweger.
Resolved that at the meeting of the RTM on Monday, May 14, 2012, if the business of the meeting has not been concluded by 12 midnight, the meeting shall adjourn at that time to meet again on Tuesday, May 15, 2012 at 8 p.m. at Central Middle School.
Thank you. Once again, that is now before us, being offered on behalf of one of our committees. Mr. Bergweger?
The Legislative and Rules Committee voted 10-0-0 to adopt this resolution.
Thank you. Discussion on item 2. Once again, I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of the resolution on item 2, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item has carried. Item number 3 now comes before us. Michael Mason, Chair of the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
The item before you tonight is item number 3. It's the budget document. And I would like to start with saying this is an honor and privilege. My very first time chairing our Finance Board, or as we call it, Board of Estimate and Taxation, through my first budget. I have submitted a message. It was upstairs up here with your voting cards. It should be distributed to everyone. And I want everybody to pay attention to the very last page on the back. There's an interesting chart we're going to get to. In normal fashion, I would read that document as past chairs have done, and I've thought about that, and I've learned a little lesson attending District 7, and I want to share it with everyone. I survived. I think the greatest importance in the budget before you is not about some capital project or an unknown capital project. I think the issue is about the financing of our town, how we do it, how we go about it, and do we have a plan? Is the plan sustainable? Is the plan flexible? I think this is so important, I'm taking this opportunity to do that. The town has had a plan for about 12 years. It's a financial plan, dates back into the early 00s. Back then, capital projects were done on an interim basis. They were not part of a budget process. The high school instructional space was done mid-budget. Everything was done on an interim basis. We replaced vehicles as we thought they needed it, not on a scheduled plan, a scheduled replacement. We had sewer lines breaking. We had an increased need for capital projects, and the BET saw that certain capital projects may have more political support than others. The Board of Ed chair at the time came to the BET and said, I just need $2 million a year to maintain these schools. No. I need more than that. This is just not sustainable. So the BET does what the BET does. It invented a plan. And back in 2002, you heard a term called CIP. Still using it today. It's still something we use. It's been changed. It's been modified. You heard about budget guidelines, a new term. You heard about modified pay-as-you-go, where the town was now going to do short-term borrowings, not borrowing internally, but borrowing externally. It was a new twist. In 2005, our current first selectman put me on the budget committee, and we can discuss his decision ability later, but with that, we also had a brand new controller in town, Peter Minarski. And I said, Peter, I understand the architect and what the architects are trying to do with our budget plan, but I need to see it visually. Remember that document I handed out, or that was handed out? Look at the back page of that. And it's really funny because in 2005, Peter Minarski sat down and we worked on a 10-year capital and operating model for the town of great importance. Back in 2005, the town was still hiring people. Back in 2005, the grand list was growing at 1.25% a year. We had some years 1.36% growth. Revenues from our conveyance tax, from our interest income, from our building permits were $10 million higher than they are today. We had a little idea that healthcare was going to be a hot spot. No pun intended. And if you look at that model, you could see we anticipated healthcare to be one of the things that was going to grow. Our pension fund contribution, 2005, $688,000. In front of you tonight, 17 point what? Last year, 14 point. The year before, 12 point. Back in fiscal 05, the town need to finance in your budget was $307 million, roughly. Today, the book in front of you and the model in front of you are almost identical to that, and I'll explain. Back in 2005, we thought the Board of Ed was going to go from 107 to mid-140s. Sorry, but you're still in the 130s. We thought that as we built our models that we would go forward. Back in the day when we were at 307, Nathaniel Witherell was in our operating model. It is not now. It's in a revolving fund. So if you take the budget books that you have, calling for $404,000 of spending, $404 million of spending, and you add Nathaniel Witherell in, which is roughly $20 million, and you also have to add the revenues because it's somewhat neutral, you're going to find Mr. Minarski was off by $2 million in 8 years. We didn't plan that. Yes, we did. It was a plan. It's been carried out. It's been executed to this day. Then 2008 comes along. Utility costs, pension fund takes a tank, can't make interest on our money, building permits literally cease, conveyance tax falls off this, and to top that off, we had a negative fund balance of $1.5 million in the town. So how did we, in 05, say where we were, said where we want to go, and handled the economic crush? How did we do that? I think I have the answer. Planning, discipline. The BET is the only branch of our government that really can do that. Not this BET, prior BETs, the next BETs. And let's talk about how the BET can do that. Obviously, deferring capital projects is a big conversation. Sure, we do it, but I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Okay? Last year, Stephen Walco stood here and said, if you want this auditorium thing, and you want this firehouse, and you want to do Nathaniel Witherell, you will run into a point of about 4 or 5 years where you will just have to hold off on everything else for a little bit. I think Mr. Tessie stood here before that and said the same thing. We have to be cautious, but we'll get to it. Plan and discipline. The BET can choose tax rates. The BET can choose our funding rate, how we borrow, when we borrow. We can define our borrowing strategies. One of the new twists that the BET is talking about, we talk about labor contracts. The BET just this year, during the budget deliberations, met with our labor director for the town, and we started talking about the focus on the cost of a labor contract and what our willingness to fund that labor contract was. The days of the poor park gardener versus the school administrator didn't work anymore. We need to continue to know where we are and where we want to be. And the BET, obviously, back in 05, when it was talking about health care, certainly didn't do it in the form we do it now. It's exact. It's done on an actuarial basis. We've changed the labor contracts, and the health care is to the exact number. It took many years to do that and several contracts and a lot of hard work. And there's a lot more the BET can do. I think back and I said if we had the revenues that we haven't had in the last 5 years, just on our building permits, etc., where would our cash position be with $50 or $60 million more? And yet, during that same period, the BET, who has promised and continues to promise stable and predictable taxes, took the rate of inflation in your mill rate and we brought it down from the typical 3.5, 3.6, and we brought it down lower. We brought it into the 2s, and I think you're in front of you tonight we're suggesting that it looks like about a 2.75% mill rate increase. Can that be sustained? I don't know. But I have 11 other people that I'm sure will work towards a consensus on that answer. I hope that this offers a perspective that it's not budget to budget. May 31st starts the next budget season for the BET with all the department heads. It's a full day meeting talking about our capital models, what cash we'll have, different projects. The project at the high school with the soil remediation, I assure you, is not the first hurdle that's hit the Board of Estimate and Taxation, nor is it the first hurdle that's hit our finance model. And I'm sure it will not be the last, although I wish I didn't really say that. Setting aside resources, anticipating a capital project. No one else can do that. We're the only community. And it's only because we really have a plan. This year we talk of setting aside revenues to be able to cover anticipated projects. It's more than that. Let me explain. So in your budget book, you have an anticipated number each year annually for what we're not going to collect on tax and what we think we're going to issue back in senior tax credits, etc. Those two numbers in fiscal 12, not the year you have in front of us, equal $3.5 million in rough numbers. So, as of today, the town of Greenwich, its tax collection is $400,000 short of being fully collected. Unprecedented. So what does that mean? That means we didn't think we were going to collect that $2 million. Now we have it. July 1, what does the BET do with that money? Thanks to a resolution that you're going to approve tonight, we're going to consider that surplus in our budget. And we're going to make an appropriation to capital non-recurring for what? Future capital projects. We picked up $2 million today finding that out. Maintaining an unreserved general fund balance. As I said, 4 or 5 years ago, the town was in the hole, $1.5 million, running out the pay-as-you-go. Today, we sit with a fund balance equal to 5.1% of our operating budget. Credit rating agencies 2 years ago put Mr. Minarski on notice that we needed to address that. We did it. It's done. We're continuing to fund our other post-employment benefit funds. We're funding our risk fund to make sure that the law department is working with us as much as possible so we, again, can plan ahead for claim settlement against the town and be ready to fund those without having it cause an upset to our plan. Using a debt policy. The debt policy is one of the most interesting terms that we've seen, and we've seen the articles on it. The debt policy is a tool that's not just used to say how much we want to borrow. If we didn't have the debt policy, we would have thought differently about how we're putting funds away. But the debt policy helps us address our capital needs and wants, schedule it without sacrificing working on our infrastructure, which we know still needs work. The budget decisions for tonight are not about MISA, and they're not about a capital project that we don't know about. I can't talk about capital projects I don't know about, but it's about a sound fiscal policy, and if you believe that that diagram that you have on that back page and the fact that we've pulled it off to today, if you don't believe that there's a plan and that there's ways and means and the right implements to correct the problem, then we need to really revisit what we're doing. And the BET believes we have that. This BET. I'm going to tap real quick into MISA and the remediation. The last couple weeks have been very, 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 very difficult. A lot of questions and doomsday scenarios, 30 million next Tuesday, X this. I've tried to answer them all. Several members of the BET have given it a shot. So let's go back to what we do know. BET used your tax money, and we hired a professional attorney that specializes in these kind of claims to work with our town law department. The BET, with your tax money again, hired a consultant specializing in remediation projects to work with the building committee, the Board of Ed, DPW, Parks and Rec, and to guide us. And what we do know, not speculate, is that those consultants and attorneys have told us that this project, well, the remediation project, is a 5 to 7 year run. They've begged us not to ask them any more questions. They said, we will drive the process with the state. We will talk with the state. We will be ahead of the curve. We will define the scope of the work. Once we define the scope of the work, we will offer to the state what we would like to do. And we will see what the state says, and we will follow through. The fields are usable. The question has come up on that. We have a letter from the state, the Department of Environmental Health. Fields are fully usable, including the real fields that are not synthetic. We've been asked again and again if Mies is our primary capital project in the town. Could it wait? Could we do some other stuff? I could give a personal opinion. Every board member of the BET could. People have asked us if Mies is the project or not. For those attending the budget meetings, you'll see Mr. Pellegrino doesn't attend too many RTM meetings. He has a phobia getting a spring in his butt from the seats in this place. Doesn't mean we're not going to do the seats. As Leslie Moriarty said to me tonight when she saw the joke we put on the seat, we'll get to it, and I agree. It's the town capital model has always been not if, but when. Finally, with that said, I hope that this gives a little different look at what we don't know versus what we really do know, and what we do know is important. I can't express my appreciation enough to the appointing authorities in the town, all the town department heads, Office of the First Selectman, support staff, and finance. Peter, Roland, it's amazing. The BET members, there are 5 of them that have never been through a budget process. All the others are this easy. I can't tell you that your input was welcomed and appreciated. The 4 members of the Budget Committee, Mr. Raymer, Mr. Finger, Ms. Tarkington, and Chairman Joe Pellegrino. You have done yeoman's work. You have more ahead of you. We wouldn't have been able to be this successful if it wasn't for your work, and I sincerely thank you. Mr. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Item number 3, the budget for fiscal year 2012-2013 is now before us. Let's just get a second for that budget. All right, item 3 now has been moved and seconded and is now before us. A word briefly now about the procedure that we will follow in handling item number 3. First of all, the operative document for the budget is the 39-page document that you all were sent from the Finance Department. They were 3-hole punched pages that could be placed in a binder. The document is dated at the bottom, March 28, 2012. It is labeled RTM, and we will begin on page 1 and go through page 39. So that is the operative document. That is the resolution that is now before us. I will shortly call for the reports of our standing committees, and everyone knows we do have limits in effect, including limits on those reports, 7 minutes for all committees except for Finance and Education. When the committee reports are completed, I will call for general comments. We will then be we will be about to proceed line by line through the budget, but before I begin that, I will call for any general comments on the budget. And once again, speakers are reminded that we have a 3-minute limit in effect per speaker, per item. Once I begin going through the budget line by line, I caution our members, well, first of all, our authority is to approve the recommended amounts from the BET or reduce or delete entirely. And in order to reduce or delete the recommended appropriations, we would need a motion to do so, which would be treated as a motion to amend item number 3. And so in the event there becomes any question about procedural issues, I will explain at the appropriate time. But any motion to reduce or delete is a motion to amend item number 3. Once a motion is made and seconded, we will have discussion on that. Again, I am anticipating a motion to delete the funds for MISA, and shortly I will call for the speaker list to be brought forward, so anyone interested in preserving their right, please sign up immediately. And after we have gone through all of the account codes, we will then take up the budget resolutions that follow the budget line items, and I know we have some proposed editorial changes that will be addressed to those. When we have finished making any such amendments to the budget resolutions, I will then call for a final vote on the budget as amended by whatever we have done up until that point. We are required by charter to adopt a budget for the next fiscal year by tomorrow, by the end of the day tomorrow. If we fail to do so, the budget as recommended by the BET will take effect. So our function should be to, if we don't like this budget, to put it into a form that we do like so that we exercise the authority granted to us and adopt that budget for the next fiscal year. So again, I will, when we get into the budget, I'll repeat that briefly so everyone is aware, but the budget document is not the call. It is this 39-page document that everyone was sent by the Finance Department. At this point, I will ask our standing committee chairs to come forward and to give their reports on item number 3. Bill Drake, Chair of the Budget Overview Committee, you will go first, and whatever order the remaining committee chairs prefer, just step up as one finishes. Bill Drake.
Good evening, everyone. The Budget Overview Committee's review of the budget had 2 parts. First, the whole budget, and then MISA and Greenwich High. We adopted reports with recommendations on these 2 topics, which you received several days ago. And to be efficient, I propose to summarize them both now. Highlights of the budget. The proposed general fund budget for fiscal 2013 totals $367.7 million, an increase of 2.7%. Salaries, wages, and employment-related costs represent about 74% of the town's budget. As a result, effective management of the number of employees and initiatives to increase productivity are important. Town spending is increasing faster than incomes or property values in Greenwich. It is important that operating spending increases be limited to preserve the long-standing benefit of a government which is affordable. The Board of Education continues to be the largest component of the Town of Greenwich budget, with a fiscal 2013 request of $139.4 million in operating expenses. This number represents a 2.2% increase over the previous budget. The budget reflects the required resources to address the strategic issues to achieve improved academic performance. School spending other than MISA and Greenwich High in the budget, school capital spending other than MISA and the Greenwich High site, is $7.4 million. Facility needs are being met, not ignored. The fiscal 13 budget reflects successful initiatives to control healthcare costs. The healthcare budget for fiscal 13 is $45.7 million, a decrease of 1.5%. Pension contributions continued to increase from $14.5 million last year to $16.4 million this year. Further increases are coming. We have a funding ratio of about 77% and an unfunded liability of about $100 million, which is a real debt obligation of the town. The fiscal 13 capital budget includes $46.2 million for general fund capital and $12.2 million for the other funds, primarily sewers. Total capital spending is $57.4 million, which substantially exceeds the capital projects tax levy of $34 million, so the town will need to increase its debt. Capital appropriations have been large recently for MISA, the Witherell, and for other projects. To conform to the town's debt policy limit of $210 million, capital items totaling $66 million will need to be eliminated or deferred beyond 2016. We will have to make careful capital planning decisions in the coming months. The Budget Overview Committee commends the thorough work of the town departments and the Board of Education to create the budget. We benefited from the continuing cooperation of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Decisions on capital spending are of primary importance in this budget and the next one, particularly with respect to MISA and the Greenwich High site. Our committee voted 10 in favor, District 1 abstaining, and District 2 absent, to endorse our report and to approve the budget as presented. We recommend its approval by the RTM. On the MISA and Greenwich High project topic, the BOC recommends approval of the budgeted amounts totaling $16.1 million. The tremendous uncertainty surrounding the ultimate cost of MISA and the remediation of soil contamination at the Greenwich High site makes the MISA decision very difficult. However, given where we are and weighing the upside and downside of delay, we come out on the side of going ahead. The following are the key factors leading to this recommendation. There was full and strong support from the BOE, the BET, the RTM, and the community for the MISA project before the environmental discoveries. The current construction cost environment is favorable for pricing. Costs are likely to increase if the project is delayed. While the non-MISA site remediation costs may turn out to be large, the authorities are likely to allow remediation to be carried out over several years. Timely appropriation of the second portion of construction of $11.8 million is necessary to allow for reimbursement from the State Bureau of School Facilities of up to $4.9 million. Delaying into the next fiscal year may mean the reimbursement is reduced, effectively raising the cost of MISA. MISA site remediation plans are pending approval by the EPA, and costs can be closely estimated for that portion of the site. Environmental issues at the larger non-MISA site, the Greenwich High Fields, are more complex. The fiscal 13 budget amount of $1.5 million will continue the investigation and planning. Remediation costs are expected to be known by the spring of 2013. These costs will then form the basis of subsequent appropriations to be considered and approved by all parties, including the RTM. These costs may be large and could prompt adjustment of future capital budgets. However, remediation is legally required and cannot be avoided. Our committee voted 9 in favor and 3 against to adopt our report and our recommendation to approve the MISA Greenwich High amounts. District 7 voted no because of her preference that the RTM continue to be involved in the ultimate decision regarding the MISA and soil remediation project, rather than leaving the decision to the BET, who have not defined as a policy matter the potential impact, if any, to other capital projects, the debt limit, or mill rate increases. District 1 was opposed to MISA from the beginning and viewed a fiscal surprise as possible and recommends waiting for more clarity. District 2 was also opposed to MISA from the beginning, finds the project too expensive, and doesn't like the design.
45 seconds.
We didn't view this decision as easy. There are valid reasons for and against that deserve respect. Weighing them, our committee's majority vote was to recommend that the RTM vote in favor of the MISA Greenwich High appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Brown, Chair of our Education Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests. I have the report of the Education Committee. On Monday, February 27th, the committee met with the members of the Board of Education, with the Chair Leslie Moriarty, and members of their administration to discuss the Board of Ed's request. It was a special meeting. It was informational. No vote was taken. The overview of the budget was given, statistics regarding the budget request and the school's comparison with other school systems, and the funding provided. Generally similar in presentation. If those attended the public meeting or the budget committee meetings, we saw much of the same information shared with our committee. Questions were asked regarding the allocation of the dollars, funding challenges, the adequacy of the condition of the facility and maintenance of the facilities. We, the committee, feel that the Board of Ed needs to continue to work on development and implementation of a formal multi-year school-wide maintenance program. That wrapped up the discussion on the Board of Ed budget. On Monday, April 2nd, we had Peter Sutton, the executive director of the Bruce Museum, who helped us understand their plans for the coming fiscal year. The appropriation being requested funds, that's ours, is only a portion of their true needs. It's a contribution that the town is making to the Bruce Museum. The balance of the monies come from other contributions and fees that are collected, which offset the rest of the budget. We encourage the town continue its support of the museum as it adds a great value to the residents, our students, and to the many visitors that come to visit. We did have a brief discussion regarding their, I'll say, prior building plans, which were shelved as we entered in the recession. Nothing is being moved forward imminently, but they'll be reconsidering what the opportunities look like in the future. Also on Monday, April 2nd, we had Carol Mahoney, the director from the Greenwich Library, and representatives of the Peterson Foundation help us with their budget request. They described a couple of minor changes in their programs and the hours. We did recognize the use of the facility during the snowstorms and the terrible outages that we had, and their need for power, their need for bandwidth, their need to help our residents connect to the outer world. And as you'll see, their capital requests are directly oriented to extending and enabling those kinds of capabilities. We discussed the financial situation of the Peterson Foundation, which its assets were hit hard by the recession and have been clawing back, I'll say, ever so slowly. There have been adjustments in the operating accounts that those monies fund in light of lesser dollars. We encourage them to continue to work to be closer with the Board of Ed's schools, media centers, and encourage reading more. So, again, good work being done by the libraries. Also, we had for the Perrott Library, Kevin McCarthy, who discussed their budget request. Many of the same comments and discussion items were that were discussed during the Greenwich Library discussion were equivalent to and consistent with what happened at the Perrott Library. The capital request for the heating and venting system is very appropriate. Our last meeting was held this past Monday, the 7th of May. We had 10 members present. District 8 and 3 were absent at the start of the meeting. The discussion overall was minimal. We got right to the key elements of the item. First, item 440, 57223, which is the contribution for the Bruce Museum. It passed 10-0-0 with districts 8 and 3 absent. Department 701, the Greenwich Library, passed 10-0-0, also with districts 8 and 3 absent. The capital items for the library passed 10-0-0. 702, which is the Peterson wing for the Greenwich Library, passed 10-0-0. 710, which is the Perrott Library, passed 10-0-0. 710's capital expenses for the Perrott Library, 10-0-0. 315, Public Works, the Board of Ed Maintenance, passed 11-0-0 with districts 3 absent. 410, which is the health and clinical specialists in the schools, passed 11-0-0 minus district 3. 670, which is the school lunch fund, passed 11-0-0, district 3 absent. The school's operating accounts were passed 11-0-1 with district 3 abstaining as they had just arrived near the end of that conversation. 680, which are the school capital expenses, which exclude, for this time being, the MISA request. There was a brief presentation by Ms. Moriarty. She described how the initial request of $9.7 million for the various capital items was reduced down to $7.8 million, and then an additional $500,000 was taken out. It is earmarked that many of those reductions are taken against some maintenance items. We continue to encourage the Board of Ed and the BET to fund the appropriate maintenance of our school system. The item 680, the operating expenses passed 12-0-0. The capital expenses 12-0-0. The DPW GHS remediation, we had Amy Siebert assisting us for that presentation, Department 315. This money will continue our testing and develop a plan for remediation expected to be delivered sometime spring 2013. It is hopeful to get the approval of the EPA in that springtime and hopefully have some funds to begin moving towards remediation. There is no plan currently for interim appropriations to deal with remediation activities. We also wanted to highlight that the BET has put approximately $7 million away in a fund that could be used for remediation should those monies be needed. The GHS remediation was passed 1200. School capital expenses, this is the MISA. There are 3 line items in the educational capital budget. The first is the second part of the appropriation that was agreed upon last year around this time. The second part of it is the additional cost to remove the contaminated soil, and then a piece also to replenish some of the contingency monies spent so far on site testing. Ms. Moriarty helped us with the presentation. She emphasized the limitations of the present facilities, the number of students in the various programs, highlighting there are a large number of students that are turned away because of limited space. She pointed out that the previous vote that the RTM took had passed with a large majority. She also discussed the causes for various price increases, cost increases that are projected as part of this item, and the additional remodeling that needed to take place for the vocational technical space that hadn't been anticipated earlier. There is approximately $4 million of recent reimbursement monies earmarked as part of this budget process, and that is only, or is contingent upon this appropriation, we understand, being given so that we can apply for these monies from the state. The state is looking at remodeling or changing its calculation for reimbursement, so if we're not applying now, we may ultimately get a lower percentage refunded to us. We had Laura Erickson, the GHS PTA president, give a short presentation about their support for the MISA program. Joe Ross from the building committee presented some additional information about the actions of the building committee and the appropriation, getting into various methods on how to control the contamination found on the site, including the use of the coffer dam. We had Michael Finkbeiner, consultant on underwater construction, who presented his concerns that a coffer dam would not work in the situation and that the water would pass under the coffer dam through cracks in the bedrock and resulting coming into the space. Joe Ross did feel comfortable that any filtration could be handled and the crack sealed, so that was that. Attorney Jane Warren, who is the town's outside counsel from McCarter and English, explained how she and the town are working very closely with the EPA, that the remediation plan has been filed for just the MISA site, and that she was hoping that it would be approved in the next couple of weeks. She didn't expect that it would happen, but it is possible that the EPA could demand additional remediation activities around it.
1 minute.
Again, not sure. It is the case that the plan would be ready, hopefully, as I said, in 2013. We had Mr. Von Kaiserling from District 8 expressing his strong support, along with Christine Edwards. Peter Quigley questioned what would happen if the remediation got, I'll say, out of hand or became significant. Art Norton from the BED did point out that there is some projected $13.75 million in the CAFR report to deal with these costs. General consensus of the committee was that the facility is needed, but that there is a deep concern about the uncertainty of the ultimate cost and great uncertainty associated with the environmental impact that would need to be dealt with. The vote for the MISA project, the 3 items were 7 in favor, 2 opposed, 3 abstaining. The opponents were concerned that the cost, and the abstainers were concerned that we just don't have enough information yet to make an informed decision. On the resolutions, there was limited discussion in the committee. All passed 1200. That's the Board of Education line items or resolution items 43 through 45, the Greenwich Library Peterson Wing 46 and 47, and the borrowing authorization, page 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next report, Gordon Ennis, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, I'm down to 1 leg now. Have to bear with me, I'm a little slow. The Finance Committee met on May 7th in the Town Hall Lounge at 7:30. All districts were represented. There was initially one motion on MISA specifically to eliminate MISA, and that would, if it passed, would also eliminate the $300,000 remediation plan for the Votech Center. The vote on that item was 6-6. So it failed. There were no other additions or affirmations with respect to the budget that came from any of the finance subcommittees, or GO teams as we call them. So we moved to the operating and capital budget as a combined item and voted on that 9-3-0. Districts 2, 7, and 10 voted no. Their reason was that we really don't know the full cost of remediation yet. Therefore, we can't go forward with MISA until we do. In other words, we don't want to take on a large capital project with the potential of a large remediation cost hanging over us. I sent a report out to all of you. It was widely distributed. You all should have it. In addition, I participated in a really intense joint committee work 2 weeks prior to the budget, anticipating controversy on this MISA item, and frankly, to answer some questions for myself. I didn't have a good, clear view of what we ought to do even then. There were 16 of us that worked on that project, and all of you have received that. That's the most thorough compilation of information on MISA that we could put together, and the only thing that we can add to it now is, I understand over the weekend through emails, that the project has been listed on the BSF list. That was an outstanding argument before the Joint Committee finished its work. So I think with the report that I sent with respect to the Finance Committee and the report that you received regarding MISA specifically, you should have enough information to make a good, solid decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Small, Chair of our Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Transportation Committee met and reviewed the fleet budget with Jay Domasek. We discussed with him all the major items in the budget, and specifically had discussions about GPS units being added to 200 town vehicles, which was one of his major initiatives for this year, along with the replacement. Most of the vehicles that are in the capital budget are replacements. There are no new vehicles in there. We also met with Amy Siebert and Dave Thompson of DPW to discuss the DPW budget, which showed a 3.3% decrease in the budget. We reviewed the major line items in the budget, as well as mostly the capital items, and reviewed a report that DPW issued about, it was entitled the Infrastructure Report about Bridge Programs. And it reviewed all the current and future bridge programs going on. And that led us to an interesting discussion about current programs, because when we review the budget, we tend to look forward into next year. And discussion of the bridges and current projects brought us back to, well, what are we working on right now, and what do we have in progress that we're working on? And it turned out from a report that we had about $11 million worth of current programs that are continuing as an encumbrance. And we asked the question about, well, how does that compare to past years? And past years have ranged from highs of $28 million to a low of $4 million. So it seemed, and DPW felt comfortable with adding to that $11 million, the $11 million that's coming up for next year, and being able to work productively on the $22 million altogether. We also had Greg Bedrosian, who helped us discuss from the BET's perspective the encumbrance accounting and how the funds are dispersed as the projects come to their need and cash flow time. The DPW, in budgeting their funds, also puts out a cash flow projection of when the funds will be needed. We also met with Alan Corey of Parking Services, who discussed his budget areas and a major initiative on getting a license plate reader for their cars so that they can stop scofflaws that have excessive numbers of parking tickets. We reviewed miscellaneous transportation-related items. We had Jim Boutel with us, who discussed the contributions to TAG and the good works that they do throughout the town. And Steve Warzoa discussed with us his review of the school transportation budget, where we have about $5 million for student transport and $2 million for private school transport. But this is a new contract year, and because of the economy, they were able to negotiate very good new contract for the Board of Ed. Transportation Committee voted on these transportation-related items, 10-0-1, with District 3 absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John DeChapel, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
The Public Works Committee took up Resolutions 1, 2, 3, and on Resolution 3, we combined the capital improvements budget with the operating budget. That includes MISA as well. We voted 8 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention. We then took up an informal vote on the capital improvements budget ex-MISA, without MISA, and that vote was 12-0-0. Those in favor voiced the necessity of the project, of the MISA project, and the favorable timing to receive the reimbursement from the state, and the possibility that we can bifurcate the bricks and mortar from the remediation. The 3 votes opposed were based partly on the absolute cost of MISA, and then including the future costs of remediation, the unknown future costs. The 1 abstention was based strictly, she wanted MISA, but she did not want to have the question mark as to writing a blank check. Thank you.
Thank you. Kip Bergweger, Vice Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
At our meeting considering item 3, we had all districts present except District 1, and we were assisted by Mr. Jeff Raymer of the BET, Mr. Wayne Fox, our town attorney. We considered the resolutions and adopted amendments to 6 of them. I will introduce them, Mr. Moderator, at the appropriate time. We then considered the probate court budget and the law department budget. The probate court budget was increased by 2.4%, and our vote to approve it was 11-0-0. We considered the law department budget with the help of Wayne Fox. The amount of the budget had increased by 4.5% over the prior fiscal year. One of our members expressed concern that the amount of this increase exceeded the guidelines established by the BET. Mr. Fox explained that the law department has 5 full-time attorneys, 2 part-time attorneys, and 5 non-attorney staff members. The work that the department is doing includes handling of claims. There are 286 claims currently pending against the town, and of these 249 are actual lawsuits. The department also reviews contracts for the town, and in this fiscal year to date, 140 contracts have been reviewed, and some of these were negotiated by the law department. The law department personnel also meets and counsels with town departments and agencies, including the RTM, the BET, the Board of Selectmen, and commissions and committees. The law department has had success handling several types of matters, including wrongful death cases, personal injury claims, tax appeals, discrimination, highway defects, and defense of freedom of information claims. The largest percentage increase in the law department budget has been due to the hiring of experts. Mr. Fox stated that a primary cause of this increase is the need to retain expert witnesses for claims and litigation in which the town is involved. One example is the Worth Construction case, which has approximately 150,000 documents that must be reviewed and organized, and expert testimony presented on them. Another example is the Cohen case involving the mold in temporary classrooms. 86 depositions have already been taken, and we will need expert medical testimony to resist an effort to convert this into a class action lawsuit. Further additional expert appraisers are retained to provide testimony in tax appeals. One member of our committee asked if what the amount of total claims has been filed against the town. Mr. Fox replied that that number is not particularly relevant because anyone can file a claim for any amount. But the law department does meet annually with the BET to advise it of the anticipated funds that will be at risk from pending litigation for the coming fiscal year, and this amount is usually about $3,500,000. These are cases that are anticipated to go to trial or cases that are anticipated to settle. The vote on the law department budget was 11-0-0 officially. However, this is a little misleading because one of our delegates intended to vote nay on the budget because its increase exceeded the BET guidelines, but due to my confusing instructions, the delegate voted aye. And that error was not discovered until after the voting card had been presented at the clerk's office.
Thank you. Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members, guests, and especially the many students here tonight. The Land Use Committee met last Monday, May 7th. All districts were represented. We were assisted by Randall Huffman from the BET, and Donald Heller, Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, also was in attendance. The Land Use Committee reviews the departments numbers 161 through 174, the land use departments. Each of the department heads was present and presented to us a summary of their operating plan for the coming year, along with their corresponding budgets. The increase in their budgets is very small. There are no staffing changes in these departments. So we had Denise Savageau, who presented the Conservation Department budget, that's number 172. Michael Chambers presented the Inland Wetlands Watercourses budget, that's code 173. I should mention that the land use departments collect fees. In the case of inland wetlands, the fees cover over 85% of the operating budget, despite the fact that applications in that department are actually at a fairly low level. Diane Fox presented the budgets for departments 161 and 174. And again, discuss the operating plans. The operating plans, as you know, have been posted on the town website for the last 5 months. They're available for anyone to read. She did mention that we have a new zoning enforcement process that has been working quite well. And she expects an additional $300,000 of revenue in 2012 from new zoning permit fee. We voted on the operating budgets for those departments as a group. Our vote on that was 12-0-0. We also took up the capital item bridges and roads, and for that purpose we had James Michael, our town engineer, and Joseph Roberto, who is superintendent of highways. We focused particularly on the Riversville Road Bridge. That bridge is going to be replaced this year. 90% of the cost of that bridge is reimbursed to the town through our regional plan association, SWERPA, that gets the money actually from the federal government. So in order to qualify for that fund, the bridge must meet certain federal guidelines, and therefore the bridge is designed accordingly. So we took a vote on that capital item. Again, our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Karen Sadekhan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members, and guests. The Parks and Recreation Committee met last Tuesday night with all districts present. Districts 2, 5, and 8 were represented by their alternates. The Department of Parks and Recreation Director, Joe Siciliano, was present, as were Dave DeAndrea, the Operations Manager of the Griff, and Lou Berlingo from the Griff Golf Course. Also attending was Bob Brady of the BET. The committee took its final review of the department's budget. Written questions had been submitted prior to the meeting, as members had reviewed specific object codes in the budget. These questions were answered in writing by Tom Greco, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. Further questions that arose as we went through the codes that night were addressed by Joe, and questions pertinent to the golf course by Dave and Lou. The Parks and Recreation budget is conservative and responsive to current conditions. Summarized, it looks as follows. The operating budget will increase 1.8% in total operating cost. This year, the revenue was $9,784,232, and next year it is targeted for $9,960,300. 3 small new initiatives are included in this total. The initiatives include a custodial service borne by the town for the new Queen Anne building restoration, stormwater testing, which is mandated by the DEEP at $23,000, and vessel power washing at $7,980. These initiatives total $39,080. If you don't include these initiatives, the department percentage increase would have only been 1.4%. Revenue sources will increase 1.2% from this year, from $4,165,078 to $4,215,524 for 2012-13. The net cost of operation is budgeted then for $5,744,776 for this budget. The head count for the department is static at 101 positions. 22 have been reduced in the past 5 years. There are currently 5 approved positions open. 70% of the department's budget is for labor. We then took a look at the capital budget. The Parks and Recreation capital budget totals $2,846,000, less $600,000 for the replacement vehicles. 3 Dodge dump trucks for $300,000, a John Deere backhoe for $110,000, and 5 pickup trucks for $190,000. The majority of the capital items in the budget are for inspections, replacements, and repairs. The items I will read to you: playground and maintenance inspection program, $150,000. Organic turf program, switches turf to organic, $300,000. That's his ongoing. Tennis and maintenance basketball program, maintenance program, $75,000, ongoing. Trees at Risk, continuation of the initiative that is expected to span over 4 fiscal years to remove and replant trees along the town's major arteries that have been identified as being most prone to succumb to storms, $200,000. The Grass Island Duplex Grinder Pump Station replaces the gravity-fed system to a better waste process for Greenwich Boat and Yacht Club and the Town of Greenwich buildings at Grass Island, $25,000. The ferry dock inspection and maintenance. These are mandated dry dock inspections for each of the town-owned ferries, $250,000. A launch ramp at Coscob, Phase 1, design and permitting, $25,000. Marina waterline and electric upgrade at Greenwich Point and Byron Marina, $75,000. A self-contained beach cleaner rake, $20,000. The ferry lifeboat replacement, life jacket replacement program. This is a continuation of a previously approved program, $15,000. 3 utility carts, $36,000. Replacement mats for the Bentheim Western Civic Center, for replacing those purchased in 2007, $20,000. Athletic field mower replaces a 12-year-old mower, $55,000. The big ticket item is dredging the Coscob Marina. That's to remove the accumulation of silt built up over 20 years and to return the marina to a depth of 6 feet at mean low tide. That's planned for the fall of 2012, and that's a $1 million ticket. We next looked at the Griffith E. Harris Golf Course. As you know, the Griff became a revolving fund some 10 years ago. Their head count is steady at full-time now, and 9 full-time projected in the next budget. Part-time will change minutely from 9.73 positions to 9.74. Total revenue for 2012-13 will be up slightly less than 1%, or an increase from $1,951,772 to $1,969,913. The total operating costs will be up 0.2%. Net cost of operation in the budget this year was $72,613, and it will be budgeted in the next year for $50,546. That's a decrease of 30.4%. The figures in the GRIF include their capital expenses of $80,000. There are only 3 items this time: landscaping and turf equipment for $30,000, cart path upgrade for $25,000, and master plan projects for $25,000. Very lean. Our votes are as following. On the Parks and Rec operating, we voted 12-0-0. On the Parks and Rec capital, we voted 12-0-0. On the Griffith E. Harris Golf Course, 12-0-0. Lastly, we reviewed the resolutions numbers 48 to 52 that are relevant to the Department of Parks and Rec, all of which authorize the department to accept funds and gifts. The vote was 12-0-0. I'd like to thank the department for their diligence in preparing this budget, I'd like to thank our committee members who did such a good job reviewing it multiple times. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexis Voulgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Good evening. I left my notes at home, so I'm going to wing it. The Health and Human Services Committee met over the course of 2 months to discuss the 5 departments that fall under our review. We divided them up. In April, we met with the Department of Social Services, the Commission on Aging, and the Board of Health, and then in May, we met with the Nathaniel Witherell and GEMS. In each case, we met with either the commissioner or the chair of the department, and then various board members. The Department of Social Service budget remains flat, and our committee was impressed with how the department was working to form collaborative relationships within the community. As you may recall, in the past, there was some question about how we were gathering data from them and how they were able to measure their success. And our committee really felt that the current board and the commissioner were doing an excellent job of providing clear and concise data using their evolved methods, as well as reaching out to the community and starting initiatives they had talked about before, such as job training, extended after-school care, and partnering with external entities, such as Jewish Family Services, Neighbor to Neighbor, things that would reach out to the community. There was some concern by one of our members in District 8 that he would like to see the external entities job pulled out and folded into another department, and our committee took a motion whether or not to remove $50,000 from the Department of Social Services budget. That motion failed, 11-0-0. Our committee then voted on the entire budget for social services, which is, again, flat, and our vote was 10-0-1, with District 8 abstaining from the vote and District 9 not present for the vote. We then moved on to the Board of Health. We continued to be impressed as a committee with the extensive work that the Board of Health is doing with less. You may recall that they lost a health services outreach worker or a health educator, and that over the years, the department is still able to provide the community with high-quality programs such as flu clinics and tick testing. Caroline Baisley did indicate that she expressed disappointment that the BET did not approve a full-time disaster worker. Presently, we have a half-time disaster worker, and they would like to have a full-time disaster worker, but our committee felt that the department could adequately be serviced by the current part-time worker that we have. Our vote on that committee was 11-0-0, again with District 9 absent. Nathaniel Witherell. Alan Brown came to speak with us about the Nathaniel Witherell and the plan for Project Renew. The bulk of our conversation focused on the upcoming construction project, and specifically how the facility will manage during construction regarding census and the proper payer mix in order to make sure that their finances remain favorable and they can continue with this project without incurring a great amount of cost to the town. Our vote was 11-0-1 with District, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Our vote was 11-1 1101, with District 2 abstaining because she felt that she did not have enough information about the ultimate finances of this program. The Friends of Nathaniel Witherell is expected to contribute up to $1 million next year. They're going to be kicking off their fundraiser. They are cautiously optimistic that they can raise up to $5 million, and that would be contributed toward the overall cost of Project Renew. Again, we were very impressed with what the committee has done, with what the board has done, with what all of the members of the community have done in terms of trying to make this program happen. And so, again, our vote was 1101. The Commission on Aging, our vote was 1100 with the budget. It's a very flat budget. Sam Deibler spoke to our committee. We discussed the many programs that the Commission on Aging offers and the efficiency in which they do it, given the space limitations of their current building. We discussed the need to possibly try and find a new building for them, or that they're in the process of finding a new building. They haven't done that, but as you know, the program continues to grow. They're offering more meals, more seniors are coming, they're offering more programs. The range of seniors that they have are people who are, slightly over the retirement age, all the way up to older retirees in their 80s and 90s. And so how you work with that space, again, we felt very confident. Our vote was 1100 for them. And GEMS, which is our last group. They have a modest increase in their budget of about $93,000. They report that with the addition of the King Street ambulance station, which is now open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that they have been able to reduce their extended response time significantly, benefiting the community. They're continuing to look for a permanent home. They presently rent a facility on East Putnam Avenue, but they would prefer to own something. They're in negotiations, very, very preliminary negotiations with the owner of the building that they presently rent to see if they could possibly do some fundraising or capital, raising some capital to buy that. That would allow for greater staff training, the ability for the ambulances to be undercover, also training that they can provide to the community that would be revenue producing. Our vote on that committee was 1200. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final standing committee report, John Harkins, Chair of our Town Services Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow members. I'm going to do this newspaper style. We had a dozen meetings with departments, had 24 actual people involved in this, either in one or more meetings. We had guests from the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Thank you. Mr. Mason, Mr. Raymer, and Mr. Norton. And I'll cut right to the chase. We approved all of the budgets that we reviewed, all 12 of them, 1200. There was vigorous discussion. It needs to be said that we looked at each one individually, and now I'll get to some of the detail. We reviewed the RTM budget, which was up 2.1%. Emergency operations, which was up 1.9%. The First Selectman's Office, the Purchasing Department, Administrative Services, they were up 1.5, 2.5, and 0.5 respectively. Registrar of Voters, 15.8% due to the number of elections that are likely to happen this year, and they must provide for the contingency of them. And we reviewed information technology up 1.6%, town clerk 0.2%, emergency operations, as I said, was 1.9%, First Selectman's Office, I mentioned, human resources up 5.7%, primarily due to a salary expense increase, fire department up 7.3%, again due to extraordinary expenses that they had in staffing with overtime. We also had the review for the police department up 2.8%, a very, very lengthy and complete review of the operation thanks to Captain Kordick. And there we had 2.8% increase. They are due to some capital items, including vehicle replacement, repainting and refurbishing police boat, $48,000, storage area network, $165,000. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our committee reports on the budget. At this point, we are prepared to have discussion on any general points to be made about the budget. So I will call for any interested speakers who would like to make general comments addressed to the budget. Dr. Carl Carlson, District 1. And I remind all our speakers there is a 3-minute limit in effect.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, 4 years ago, our country entered into a financial emergency period, which is apparently beginning to end now. I think our budgets have gone up about 3% in each of those 4 years, and I include tonight's budget among them. I suspect there will be no cuts when we come out of here later tonight. But I don't think we've done a good enough job during that period. I think we should be very careful in terms of these declines. We just missed a depression. It looks to me like we had a well-managed depression that Dr. Bernanke saved us from what could have been. I think what we should do in our financial planning is watch what the Federal Reserve is doing very carefully. Their unprecedented low interest rates are telling us, I believe, that they regard the situation overall as deflationary, with the deflation coming out of the housing sector. What we've essentially done is, in the last 4 years, is we've added about 12% of real money into the budgets. The budgets have been increasing for personnel costs because of general inflation. With the deflation in the housing sector, that wasn't there. We should do better.
Thank you. Any other interested speakers addressing the budget in general? Seeing none, at this point I will again remind you of our procedure in going through this budget document. We will be working with the 39-page document sent to all members by the Finance Department. And we will start on page 1. I will read each major account code, and if any member has a motion addressed to that particular code, when I call it, please get my attention. If I don't see you, stand and call out to be recognized. Once again, each motion to reduce or delete a line item will be treated as a motion to amend. There will be debate on any such motion. I will let you know I have asked for the sign-up list on the MISA motion. The preliminary count, there were some double bookings, but to the best of our ability, it appears to be a total of approximately 65 speakers who have signed up. So let us proceed with the first page, RTM page number 1, and it begins with code 101, representative town meeting. All right. 101, representative town meeting. 102, ethics. 104, emergency operations. 105, office of the first selectman. 106, purchasing. 107, administrative services. 109, human resources. 111, probate court. 120, registrars of voters. 130, finance. 131, retirement. 134, information technology. 135, assessor. 136, board of assessment appeals. 139, tax collector. 140, law. 150, town clerk. 161, planning and zoning board of appeals. 170, condemnation commission. 171, planning and zoning commission. 172, conservation commission. 173, inland wetlands and watercourses, one word. 174, land use administration. 195, commission on aging. 196, senior center. The fire department. 201, Fire Administration. 202, Training. 204, Fire Marshal. 205, Firefighting Force. 206, Fire Apparatus and Equipment. 207, Fire Department Buildings. 208, Volunteers. Police Department. 211, Police Administration. 212, Dispatch and Communications. 213, General Services. 216, Criminal Investigation. 217, Uniformed Patrol. Department of Public Works. 301, DPW Administration. 302, Engineering. 312, Highway, Streets, and Bridges. 315, Highway Board of Ed Maintenance. 321, Waste Disposal. 345, Building Construction and Maintenance. 351, Building Inspection. Vehicle Maintenance. 380, Fleet. Health Department. 401, Administration. 405, Environmental. 410, Special Clinical Services. 415, Family Health. 425, Laboratory. External Entities. 440, External Entities. Social Services. 501, Administration. 502, Adult and Family Services. 509, Aging, Homemaker Only Services. Now, with respect to the schools, we take what are commonly referred to as the Class 1 expenditures. We don't have line item authority with respect to those expenditures. So any motion addressed to the schools, essentially their operating budget, we would address to the 600 Board of Ed Administration account. Any such motion? All right. That's it for schools, at least not including capital. 701, Greenwich Library. 702, Peterson Wing. 710, Perrott Library. Parks and Recreation. 801, Administration. 811, Recreation Supervision. 812, Organized Recreation. 814, Eastern Civic Center. 815, Community Centers. 816, Skating Rink. 817, Western Civic Center. 821, Parks and Trees Administration. 822, Parks, Playgrounds and Fields. 825, Equipment Maintenance. 829, Trees. 831, Marine Supervision. 832, Maintenance, Marine Maintenance. 833, Beaches. 834, Harbors and Boating Facilities. Fixed charges. 901, Employee Benefits. 902, Unemployment and Workers' Compensation. 908, Insurance. 911, Taxes for Town Properties. 926, Non-Public School Costs. 950, Repayment of Debt. 999, Transfer to Other Funds. That concludes the general fund expenses excluding capital. And by the way, that total, as you see on page 10, is $358,009,313. That brings us to capital projects. This is on page 11. 105, Selectmen. 106, Purchasing Department. 134, Information Technology. 206, Fire Apparatus. 213, Police General Services. 312, DPW, Highway, Streets, and Bridges. 315, DPW Board of Ed project done by DPW Highway, Streets, and Bridges. 321, DPW Waste Disposal. 345, DPW Building, Construction, and Maintenance. 380, Fleet. 402, Health, Community. 502, Social Services, Adult and Family Services. 680, Board of Ed. I believe we have motions addressed in this account. There were 4 districts that informed me that they had a motion addressed to the MESA $12,215,000 appropriation. So those district leaders will come forward. All right, we have districts 6, 7, 10, and 11 represented here. Colleen Jenkins, Chair of District 6.
Good evening. On Thursday, May 10th, with a vote of 11-9-0, District 6 passed the following motion. In order to facilitate organized debate without recommendation as to the merits, it has been moved and seconded to direct the District 6 Chair to place a motion on the floor to delete $12,215,000 from Code 680-956-13163. Thank you. And I will make a motion at the appropriate time, as you indicate, Mr. Moderator.
All right, well, you just did. So that motion being made on behalf of one of our districts does not require a second. Valerie Stauffer, Chair of District 7.
Good evening. On Thursday, May 10th, our members of District 7 voted on the following resolution: that $12,215,000, Code 956-13163, be deleted from the Town of Greenwich capital budget 2012-13. Members voting in favor of deleting were 10, 3 opposed, and 4 abstaining. The 3 members who were absent that night have all indicated that they would have voted to delete. Thank you.
And Louisa Stone of District 10.
As acting secretary for District 10, I can report the district voted on a resolution to delete the sum of $12,215,000 from capital account 680-956-13163. The vote was 9 in favor, 7 opposed, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Despina Pasoliotis, Chair of District 11.
With a majority vote of 11-7-2, District 11 moved to amend the budget by deleting the sum of $12,215,000 under line 680, new buildings, MISA, from the capital budget.
All right, thank you. That motion to delete $12,215,000 for the MISA project is now before us, and we will have debate on that proposed motion. I do have a list of speakers. Once again, there are by one count 51 in favor of the appropriation, meaning opposed to this motion, and 14 who would like to delete, speakers who are speaking in favor of this motion to delete the funds. So let me remind you, we will hear first from the Chair of the Board of Education, Leslie Moriarty, who will have, as the principal opponent of this motion, up to 10 minutes. All other speakers will be limited to 3 minutes, but if you do the math, we would be here for a very long time if all of our speakers spoke for their full 3 minutes. So, just a reminder, it is not out of order for speakers who intend to make certain points that previous speakers have already been made, simply to indicate that they adopt those prior statements and perhaps not repeat what has already been made. But everyone is, to the extent additional motions are not made to limit debate on this item, all speakers are entitled to speak for their 3 minutes. So we will begin with Leslie Moriarty, Chair of the Board of Ed. Ms. Moriarty.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moderator and members of the RTM, I'm speaking tonight in opposition of the motion to delete the MISA funding. I first want to acknowledge the hard work and dedication that all the RTM members devote to your responsibilities and the many hours you've spent to understand the issues surrounding this decision. But first, I want to take a look at the history of MISA. The need for these facilities was debated last year, and by a 2-to-1 majority vote, the RTM recognized the educational need and supported MISA. Some of the reasons were our facilities are substandard and insufficient for the enrollment and the programs that we're proud to offer. The facilities are not competitive when compared to schools in our neighboring towns or in our comparable DERG districts. MISA as a project will double the size of our classroom space, add 50% more seats in the auditorium, and significantly upgrade the flexibility and the attributes of the auditorium and supporting spaces. We have more than 1,000 students, or 1/3 of our enrollment, participate in music or theater programs, and this larger auditorium will meet state guidelines and provide for additional educational opportunities. An additional benefit is that the community will have more access to the new auditorium and will also benefit from the enhanced capabilities. The Board of Ed recently reviewed the educational specification that have driven the design of the building and determined that these ed specs are appropriate for the high-quality high school program that we offer at Greenwich High School. The reason we're debating this issue this year is that contamination was found at the high school site. The specific source of that contamination is unknown, but likely to have occurred during the initial construction of the school 40 years ago. This discovery added another required capital project to the town's list, and it's increased the cost of MISA by an estimated $4.6 million. So what was a $31 million project last year may now be a $37 million project. The difference, if you do your math, between 31 and 37 also includes $400,000 for the phased funding approach that the BET instituted last year, and about $900,000 of cost related to land use requirements and the additional impact on the VOTEC classroom space. So the question to the RTM now is, does this new information change the prioritization of MISA and the town's ability to fund it? First, regarding the priority, to me and to you, I hope, the answer should clearly be no. The educational need is well established. The feasibility study done by the Board of Ed was approved 5 years ago, and the project has been working its way through the planning and budgeting cycles. The RTM approved the project last year with the expectation of completing the funding commitment this year. The time is now. So secondly, does the RTM have the information it needs to move forward with appropriating the funds for the project? And here I would say the answer is yes. In prior years, the RTM has reflected on the financial plan at the budget time that's presented to it by the BET and has voted on that budget based on that financial plan. Since March, when the BET has approved the plan before you, there's been no new information on any capital projects, the Fields project, MISA, or any other. The BET tonight has presented its long-term model, showing that it can accommodate changing circumstances while keeping the mill rate low and staying within the debt guidelines. This financial model includes cash reserves to start addressing the potential cost for the GHS Fields project, as well as the construction of MISA, the Central Fire Station, and Nathaniel Witherell. The town's consultant on the Fields project frequently cites evidence that remediation projects can be done over many years based on what the town determines is the most advantageous and affordable way to address the situation. The BET has conditioned the MISA funds to allow a review of the complete project costs after the firm bids have received and prior to releasing construction funds. This provides for a mechanism to slow or delay if financial circumstances of the project change. The funding appropriation tonight will also allow the building committee to get the most competitive pricing. The project would be able to go out to bid as one complete project rather than in pieces. And this funding allows the Board of Ed to get on the state-approved projects list. You heard a statement earlier that the project's already on the list. I don't believe that that's true. In order for us to be on the list, we have to provide certification that there's a full appropriation for the project, which we won't have unless you approve that tonight. By getting on the list, if we get the appropriation, it will lock in the current reimbursement rate that currently calculates to up to $4.9 million benefit to the town. And we know that the state is facing difficult financial pressures such that there's a real risk to the reimbursement rates being lowered. We also know that construction costs are likely to increase with any delay to the project. So in summary, I ask you to support MISA. The schools are a critical asset to the town to attract new residents, corporate headquarters, and to maintain our property values. the high school should be the flagship school in our of all our buildings, and it is not. The BET has put in place sufficient checks and balances to minimize the risk to the town and has a financial model that can meet the needs of all town residents over the next several years. And the Board of Ed has prioritized this expansion project for the last 5 years, so we ask for your support to keep it moving forward. So please vote no on this resolution to delete the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Tessie, our first selectman, to be followed by Drew Marzullo. I ask that you hold applause following each speaker so that we may move as quickly as possible. Peter Tessie, our first selectman.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, guests. One of the joys serving as first selectman is Greenwich remains a premier residential community that people choose to live, work, and play. During the course of carrying out my duties, I encounter many people. They may be multi-generational residents, relatively new residents, or visitors passing through. All of them share a common reason why they remain or came to Greenwich. It is because our foremothers and forefathers made investments in Greenwich. Greenwich residents respect and appreciate the wise investments made by those leaders that came before us. How does one assign value to their family's safety, neighborhood schools, cultural and fine art facilities, parks, beaches, and stability of our citizen-driven government? Do the investments made decades ago still pay dividends? The answer is a resounding yes. From my perspective as a parent of preschool-aged children, I often ask their peers' parents, many new to town and unaware of what I do, what brought you to Greenwich? The responses come from couples who either moved from Manhattan or were relocated to the metro New York area from other parts of the United States or overseas. The recurring answers are, we came here because the schools are great, we feel safe letting our kids play outside. Our friends moved out here first, and we visited, and we really fell in love with Todd's Point. People really care about their community here. We like that. Tonight, it is your decision to continue this proud tradition of investing in one of the core institutions that provide value to our Greenwich residency. Our budget process is well established, incredibly transparent at all levels, Board of Ed, Office of the Selectmen, BET, RTM, and each have heard broad support for the investment in GHS MISA. Collectively, fellow citizens serving on each of these governing bodies have and continue to carefully and methodically address the requirements for remediation and its impact on construction. Together, they have navigated the unanticipated hurdles to provide a revised model by which to advance. Contained within this model are checks and balances by the BET through the condition of appropriation. This mechanism requires us to put confidence in our Board of Estimate and Taxation to do what they have a successful track record of doing, balancing the need for capital investment in valued institutions and maintaining modest and predictable rates of taxation. Please reject this motion and reaffirm Greenwich's proud tradition of investing in the institutions that add value to our Greenwich residency. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew Marzullo, to be followed by Despina Foss-Leotis.
Mr. Moderator, members, guests, students, thank you. When I was writing my remarks last night, I said to my partner, the fact that Greenwich is in a position of bringing to debate a $30 million plus capital project like MISA is in itself pretty amazing. Last year, this body overwhelmingly approved by a 2-1 margin funding for a much-needed music instruction space and auditorium. Tonight's $12 million commitment will affirm our desire and see to it that this building finally gets built. Postponement inevitably will result in increased costs. Delaying, in my opinion, is nothing more than a tactic that some are using to stop MISA completely. Tonight's vote is on MISA, not on field remediation. While it is true that final costs of remediation is unknown, it is also true that no matter what the outcome of tonight's vote, contaminated soil that was dumped on the high school grounds decades ago is now a liability Greenwich now carries and a reality Greenwich now owns. Taxpayers' money will have to be spent to clean up a mess not created by MISA. Some have tried very hard to blend both projects together, making it sound like because of PCBs and other contaminants, MISA, the building, not the poisonous dirt, has the potential of soaring to $40–50 million. One member has stated that she will not vote yes on this allocation because she doesn't think the RTM should be writing blank checks, I quote, with the taxpayers' money. That sounds good, looks good in the paper, a great talking point, but the blank check is going to be filled in with a number very soon, like it or not, independent of tonight's vote. Greenwich residents are behind this project, and this is evident by its broad community support. We serve at the pleasure of the people we represent, and the people are saying they want MISA. This is not a want, this is a need that will serve more than 1,000 music and theater students alone, 800 families from all across Greenwich, all demographics from all socioeconomic levels. Music and fine arts is a graduation requirement like science and math, English. I respectfully ask this body to vote in favor of MISA. Please approve it overwhelmingly, sending a clear message. I'll end with a joke. What do you call a lawyer who failed the bar 4 times, then passed it 5 times, then passed it on the 5th try? You call that person a lawyer. What do you call MISA tonight if it passes by a slim margin? You call it MISA. Let's pass it by a large margin and pass it by a lot. Thank you.
Despina Pasliotis to be followed by Will Sadock.
I stand before you to oppose the funding of MISA in this budget cycle. Is MISA going to go away? With $17 million already approved by this body, I don't think so. So why am I backing the District 11 majority vote to delete $12,215,000 from the capital budget intended for MISA in the budget we are voting on tonight? I attended many BET and Board of Ed meetings related to MISA. From the beginning, I thought the project was an inflated one that needed scaling down. As a fiduciary steward of the town of Greenwich, I worried about costs. I witnessed how the powers that be caved into the well-organized special interest groups that flooded MISA meetings. When the last RTM approved the plan during the May 2011 budget meeting, I reluctantly kept silent. We on the RTM knew that MISA would cost in the 30 millions, and the majority approved. However, when the problem of cleanup that would entail untold millions came up, I was no longer able to keep silent. No matter how often the Board of Ed and the BET repeated that cleanup would be bifurcated from the MISA project, in all reality, the town, or should I say the taxpayers, would have to pay for the sum total of this project. The problem is, what is the sum total? When addressed to the Board of Ed chairman, the answer was that we don't know for sure, we can estimate, but we should know in September from the consultants what the costs will be, and probably hear from the EPA and get a better handle on cleanup costs in June as to what will have to be done at the MISA footprint. But then I thought, wait a minute. If more definitive answers as to the costs involved with MISA and the high school fields could be answered by September, why is the RTM being asked to approve the MISA project going forth right now without even knowing what the total cost of the combined project will be? Why can't we wait until the next budget cycle to get a more definitive handle on the total MISA costs before allowing MISA to go forward? Why should the RTM cede its fiduciary responsibilities to the town, to the BET, and the Board of Ed by voting for a total project that is being given no limits? There is really no downside in delaying the approval of additional funds for the funding of MISA until the RTM determines what the total combined costs of the cleanup will be. All funds will eventually still, state funds will eventually still come in.
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. You should be reminded that the representative town meeting was created to ward off the influence of special interest groups that would routinely pack the town meeting by vesting its members with a fiduciary oversight over the PET budget. We have seen and heard the special interest groups packing our meeting tonight, hoping to wear us down with the cry, "We need this now."
Thank you. Will Sadock to be followed by Katie Weatherseed.
Would the chairman look favorably upon a switch in the order of the GHS speakers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Katie Weatherseed.
Hello, my name is Katie Weatherseed. I'm a senior at Greenwich High School and have been involved in the theatre and choral departments of GHS since my freshman year. And so throughout my time at the school, I've become very familiar with the auditorium. And instead of taking the time to tell you things you've probably already heard, I'd like to tell you the extent to which the auditorium has personally affected my experience with the arts. My first year in Chamber Singers, I remember singing this beautiful piece entitled Illumina le Tenebre. It's a very delicate, soft piece, and in the choir room we were able to sing it as it was intended to be sung. However, as we migrated to the auditorium the day before the concert, I distinctly remember Mr. Taylor instructing us that we had to change the dynamics so we could be heard. It's incredibly unfortunate that our facilities are the limiting factor in our performances. But on top of the auditorium's effect on the choral program, it has also had massive effects on my theatre experience. Every show I end up losing my voice. I always thought it was just a strange coincidence, but recently I realized that the poor acoustics were actually forcing me to strain my voice. And, of course, I'm not the only one who's experienced this. What's more, the lack of dressing rooms causes issues in keeping costumes and props safe and accessible, and the amount of talent in the theatre department is actually breathtaking, I promise you, but it's masked by the insufficiency of the auditorium. But this new auditorium wouldn't just help GHS students. The town of Greenwich doesn't have an acceptable performing arts centre. And that means that the Greenwich Symphony Orchestra, professional musicians, have to perform in a space that gobbles up sound. And in my opinion, that's insulting. The past few years of my life have actually been centred around theatre and music. And considering 40% of the students at GHS are involved in theatre and music programmes, I can say that many other students feel exactly the same way. This year, so far, I have been involved in 3 choir concerts, 1 black box musical, 2 plays, a main stage musical, multiple improv shows, and a collection of student-written scenes. The arts have had a profound effect on my life, and without a doubt on many other people in the town of Greenwich. And it's shocking that we would put it so low on our list of importance. So, although I can't coerce you to support MISA, I can tell you how much it would mean to me and to hundreds of Greenwich residents if we had a real space where art could be created. Thank you for your time.
Will Sadock, to be followed by Pat Harada.
Good evening, members of the Greenwich community. My name is William Sadock. And when I reflect on my past 4 years in the arts, one thing comes straight to mind: a pride in excellence within our musical community. Now, this can be seen by our band taking trips all the way to Greece. It can be seen by our band sweeping the top 4 places in a recent national competition in Chicago. But then we look further, and we realize the separation. We start to reflect upon a separation between the excellence of our students, the passion that's put in, the time we put in, our teachers, and the space that is afforded to our work. And so no, I'm not proud. I'm not proud to say that at Greenwich High School, I had to be turned away coming in to practice in the morning because our lone practice room had to be relegated to the position as a storage closet. I'm not proud that the most uncomfortable concert I've ever sat in was in my own high school when I had to sit at the floor in the back, sandwiched between freshmen, seats, and a wall because our concert space cannot fit our students for a choir concert. These are the reflections of one student, and I think there's something much more powerful here. And it's not demands about the fiduciary or the minutia of specific, it's not. It's a necessity and a thank you. It's a thank you for giving us an opportunity to show us our need. It's a thank you to let us have the opportunity to come out in scores to these events, to sing you the Hallelujah chorus last year, to spend our time on the weekends writing proposals, thinking about what we can send to Board of Ed members, RTM members, so that they know our need. It's a thank you to giving us this belief and an opportunity to show you. And I'm a student government president. I've seen apathy. This is different. It's different because this has substance. The students don't come out and hundreds on Facebook to discuss, come out in scores at these events without substance. The substance stems from a need that existed 10 years ago, and we let fester up until this point, and now stares us in the face as an even more important time. So I say, look at the students, look at the town, look at the groups that have come together, collaborated as a group, because they had a belief in something that was important. And let's not let this go 10 more years, 15 more years, and become an even more onerous project in the future. And so now I would ask that all the students who gave up their night on a night of AP testing because they believed last year and this year would stand up and be recognized by this board, because this is our belief and this is our time to say this is our town's belief. Thank you, and please vote to keep MISA, and would the students please stand and be supported for their work.
Thank you. Pat Harada and her performing arts students.
Good evening. A quick bio because I want you to hear what we're talking about. My name is Pat Harada. I was born in Byram, went to Byram School, started my violin career at 5th grade in the Byram School, went to the old Greenwich High School. My son graduated from the present high school, got a degree in teaching, and decided that this is my life. I've played my violin in Hawaii, in the Aspen Music Festival, in Carnegie Hall, in Alice Tully Hall, in the Greenwich Symphony for over 25 years. I've been teaching here for over 15 years. I love these kids. I love music. It's time for us to acknowledge that, and without further ado, I'm going to let you hear some of my kids, because I have one biological son, but I have hundreds of kids like this. Sarah Fountain, Mercedes Horner, Mark Chiam. If we don't do this now, when? Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Drake, District 5, to be followed by Valerie Stouffer, District 7.
I didn't write my name on that list, sorry.
Okay, the Board of Ed did. All right, why don't we go with Valerie Stouffer, District 7, to be followed by John Blankley.
The RTM voted last year to proceed with MISA, but that was before the toxic contaminants were discovered. For me, the issue, and with many of my District 7 members, is how we should proceed with the funding when the costs of remediation of the high school fields are unknown. I've heard the arguments for and against approval of this item, but I'm convinced Greenwich must take the conservative path that any prudent individual would take. The world economy has not yet recovered. Today there were rumors that the European Financial Alliance is breaking apart. California announced today the state budget deficit is not $9 billion, announced a few months ago, but actually $16 billion. Pensions, schools, services in the state are due to be cut. Among communities closer to home, Central Falls, Rhode Island, filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy protection when retired town employees refused to agree to a 50% reduction in pensions. Now town employees there are being laid off. I have tremendous respect for the financial expertise of the members of our Greenwich BET, but I also believe that the members of the financial boards of the European Union, of California, of Rhode Island communities have impressive expertise also. Let me now ask each of you, as an individual, to think if you would contract to put a needed addition on your home if you had a leaking underground gas tank and had no idea of the costs involved to deal with that situation. Most all prudent homeowners would wait until the costs are known. Well, Greenwich citizens, that's us. We are prudent taxpayers who would like to proceed to build MISA, but first we want to know the costs of the cleanup. Financial times now are tough. It is especially important in this economic downturn for us to postpone the MISA funding until the remediation costs are determined. Thank you.
Thank you, John Blankley, to be followed by Prior Superintendent Roger Lula.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, my purpose in speaking today is to reinforce the commitment that I gave to MISA last year and to offer some perspectives from a businessman's point of view on how I think we should tackle the current situation. Let me say briefly on the merits. I advocated strongly last year for public education on two grounds: the intrinsic merits and the competitive advantage that will be conferred upon Greenwich with an excellent school system. MISA is integral to these two purposes because of the strong link between participation in the performing arts and academic achievements. MISA is the signature investment of our generation, and we must see it through. So on to the investment. I have 4 points. First, the cost that can be specifically allocated to MISA has gone up into the mid-30s. We've heard this already. Not a happy picture, but not horrendous either, and quite within the bounds of the possible when you think what happens when you stick a shovel in the ground. I urge you not to be deterred by this number. Second, and more unpleasant, and you've heard already, is the number that we do not yet know fully, and you heard from Val on that. My attitude to it, however, is entirely different from hers. Whatever it is, simply in logic, we cannot ascribe that cost to MISA, but it is a cost which will have to be borne. We sat there for 40 years with this situation, so let's not try to swallow it all in one go. Let's spread it out over time. But that's a problem for the BET to work on, and we've heard some of their proposals already, and I'm sure that they will be able to cope with it. I would urge the RTM not to kill this project merely because MISA was the proximate cause of the discovery of the contamination, or because the next tranche of MISA funding happens to be in this year's budget. Third, and you've heard this already too, people want to wait until we have more information. In my experience with projects, this is only superficially attractive. The idea that investment risk is reduced by waiting for just one more piece of information is generally erroneous. I would argue that the greater risk to us is to miss the boat on low construction costs and the historic low cost of borrowing at this time. So let's press on with the project. Fourth, and finally, and again from my experience, in the life of any project, problems arise. We then start to search for the guilty, who knew what and when. Finding no one, we then move on to the most enjoyable part of any project, and that is the punishment of the innocent. I always used to enjoy that. In this case, however, the innocent are our children. Do not punish them by voting against MISA this evening. I urge you to vote no to the amendment and keep MISA on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger Lulo, to be followed by Lucia Jansen, District 7. Once again, please hold the applause. It's only going to delay us. Lucia Jansen is next.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and guests, it's my pleasure to be here this evening. I do want to take one personal point of privilege and thank the Board of Education for the opportunity to be here this year. It's been enjoyable for me, although some of you may question my sanity or intelligence when I say that. You've heard the first selectman, you've heard the chairman of the Board of Education describe to you the need for this project. I'm not going to repeat that. You knew it last year, you know it again tonight. You've heard several speakers, including again the first selectman and the chairman of the Board of Education, tell you that there are assurances that this is not a blank check, that there will be checks and balances through the BET controlled by the debt limit and by the millage rate policies of that board. You've also heard questions about why move forward. I've heard those in the district meetings, I've heard them in the committee meetings, and I've heard most of them around the needs of financial certainty. I'm a cautious person. What I've heard makes me feel comfortable. But no one I have heard talk in those meetings about the effect on the student body at Greenwich High School. When this project was passed last year, it would have been available, the auditorium part, for this year's freshman class when they reached the second semester of their sophomore year. The full project would not have been available to them if everything remained on schedule until their senior year. We're now already a year behind. Under the best circumstances possible and getting bids that we can move on quickly, construction could not begin until sometime at the end of this calendar year. That means the auditorium would not be available to this year's freshman class, which is the class of 2015, until their senior year, and the full auditorium and instructional space would not be available to the entire student body at Greenwich High School, all 2,700 students, until the class of 2016. Those young people who are now housed at Western, Central, and Eastern Middle School.
30 seconds.
I would encourage you to vote no on this resolution and to move forward on getting bids and construction for this project. Thank you.
Lucia Jansen, to be followed by Michael Wutzik.
Greetings, my name is Lucia Jansen, District 7. Let me begin by saying that I hear loud and clear the Board of Ed unanimous vote for prioritizing MISA above all other Board of Ed new capital projects. And likewise, I hear the PTA Council majority support of MISA, and of course the many Greenwich High School students who showed up to speak tonight. However, I and many others feel it is the prudent and responsible RTM action to postpone the construction phase of MISA until we have all the information on the toxic soil test from both the EPA and the DEEP. RTM funding deferment of a large popular project is not unprecedented. In fact, recall, members of the RTM, just in May 2010 budget meeting, the RTM voted to postpone the funding of the Central Fire Station. Just as MISA, after both the first selectman and the BET had approved the Central Fire Station project as sufficient to their satisfaction, including BET conditions, as we have with MISA, the RTM voted to reduce the project funding by $23 million to $750,000 in order to pay for A&E drawings, and once completed, the project returned to the RTM for full funding approval. As Greenwich Time described the vote, refusing to sign what it interpreted as a blank check for
for a project clouded by uncertainties, the RTM voted overwhelmingly, 180 to 30, for a new central fire station until it gets answers about the scope of the work. Sound familiar? And as we know now, it took over a year for all the details to be worked out by the respective parties. And once they did, the RTM overwhelmingly approved the project. The issues with the school fields are far more consequential, with children's health involved, not knowing where and how much soil contamination exists, and the ultimate cost impact to the town of Greenwich taxpayer and other capital projects. And if not enough is the continued uncertain economy and high unemployment, please, I ask you, the RTM, to repeat the responsible vote of the past and approve the soil remediation test, but postpone the full funding, that is, delete the $12.5 million until all information is available. I would also like to add the final observation
30 seconds.
that of the $404 million 2012-13 budget, over 90% is the operating costs. I wonder when the town of Greenwich will decrease its ever-increasing operating budget so that we can adopt more pay-as-you-go policy for many of these worthy and noble capital projects rather than ever-increasing, compounding tax increase and debt. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Wotzik to be followed by Chris Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, I'm Mike Wotzik from District 11. A year ago, despite some reservations, I, together with the overwhelming majority of you, was persuaded that MISA should be prioritized as the town's #1 capital project. As we all know, over the past year, as the preparatory work on MISA commenced, the soil contamination at GHS was discovered. The required remediation will be costly, no question about that. But to be fair, the remediation costs really have nothing to do with MISA. And canceling or postponing MISA would not eliminate those costs. Having been convinced a year ago that MISA is the town's top capital project, and having been joined in that by the vast majority of you, I do not see why the discovery of soil contamination at the high school site would now cause us to change the order of priority of our capital spending. Indeed, I continue to believe that MISA is our #1 capital priority. Okay, maybe the soil remediation has to move into first place. Maybe. But why would we conclude that a project that until now has been the town's top capital project suddenly has no priority at all? While it's possible that some future capital spending will have to be delayed, I do not see a case for deleting the town's top capital spending priority from the budget altogether. I believe the BET has a good plan for dealing with the costs of remediating the contamination at the high school site, while also keeping the MISA project, which the town clearly wants, on track. I urge you to vote no on the resolution to delete MISA from the 2012-13 capital budget. Thank you.
Chris Winters to be followed by Bill Galvin.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and guests. I speak to you tonight in my capacity as the Greenwich High School headmaster, as a graduate of Greenwich High School, as a parent of a student at Greenwich High School, and one who has deep pride in our educational institutions and great appreciation for all that the taxpayers of Greenwich have given us. We have true excellence in music and theater programs at Greenwich High School, despite our inadequate space. You know the need for MISA project and as a facilities project. This project will greatly improve the parking situation, the traffic flow, the lighting, as well as the instructional space and the auditorium. You also heard tonight about the need as an educational need, and it is great. This fall, we were discouraged to find out that summer work to improve the parking lots had unearthed the problem dating back to when Greenwich High School was built, a time shortly thereafter when I was running around on those fields playing in the same dirt. Our teams, our seniors, our staff, our parents adjusted to this reality. Not one student, staff member, parent, or team complained to me about the inconvenience. At least they didn't complain to me. In short, our community responded in a very positive way. I'm heartened by that and very grateful for it. For the Greenwich community, MISA will increase the status of Greenwich as a cultural hub and provide the Center for Enjoyment of the Arts for decades to come, a center that will serve our students and our community. For the students of the Greenwich Public Schools, the MISA project meets a critical educational need, a need that we will continue to have until it's addressed. And I'd like to thank all the students and staff members who came out tonight. I don't know how many of you out there are aware of the pressures on students at this time of year with AP testing and others, but it's remarkable. So many of them will not benefit from MISA, yet they came out to show support tonight, and now I think you should all go home and study some more and get a good night's sleep. So I strongly urge you to keep our interest in MISA alive, to invest in it as a community, and to reject the proposal that was made tonight to remove money from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Galvin, to be followed by John DeChapel.
Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members, I'm Bill Galvin, Vice Chair of District 7. Those of you who read the MISA story in today's Greenwich Time probably read the comment by our esteemed colleague, Chris Van Keyserling, who was suggesting that tonight we would hear much pontification, bloviating, and blathering. I hate to suggest that he might, in fact, have been prescient in his comments, but nevertheless, I don't think that among this body, as has been demonstrated by the vote last year, there's any doubt that the MISA project needs to be done. I think the thoughtful comments made by the students this evening about the performance space, we've all heard versions of that over the years. Some of you sitting here have experienced those same things, so that's a known fact. Nobody's pushing back against that. Same thing for the auditorium. No one, I think, among this group is pushing back saying, no, we don't need a better auditorium, something that is much more reflective of what Greenwich is all about and how Greenwich projects itself to the rest of the world. That's a given. There's no need for the constant argument that we need this, we need this. We get that. My concern is that, as was said in that famous movie, Jerry Maguire, show me the money. Now, there was a compelling presentation made earlier this evening, the first presentation by Mike Mason, which I thought was very good in what it said about the BET's ability to essentially fund appropriately virtually anything this body approves. The operative aspect of that is this body has to approve it. And I'm convinced that we have enough financial expertise in this town to blend it appropriately with other expenses. We can finance it in the capital markets in a thoughtful way. We can keep our AAA rating. We can do all of the things that Greenwich has always done. There will be some increases in your taxes.
30 seconds.
But we can get it done. My concern is timing. Can we not wait effectively 4 more months to get better information? What if we get surprised again? No one can say specifically what the refund from the state of Connecticut will be. I've heard $1.5 million to $4.9 million tonight, and a lot of it is qualified. So we don't know. I think it's important that we take our time. 4 months is not a long time relative to the 40 years that this project has been in place, and more recently, how long it's been discussed.
Thank you.
And I think we should consider waiting. Thank you.
John DeChapel, to be followed by Mary Radcliffe.
Please give me 1 minute. The interest rate on the 10-year Treasury was 1.77 closing tonight. Never has funding been so cheap, yet an auditorium so valuable. Buy your expensive house in Greenwich now, that is to say, the Misa, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Radcliffe, to be followed by Laura Erickson.
As president of the Greenwich Symphony Orchestra and as a person heavily involved and in constant contact with Greenwich High School's music department and orchestra, band, and choral music teachers, I ask you to please support the MISA project. The facilities at Greenwich High School are woefully inadequate. The music instruction rooms are way too small, especially now that the high school comprises 4 grades and an increasing number of students want to take music classes and participate in musical ensembles. Yes, these are the few formative years in our young people's lives that they can and should enlarge their cultural horizons to study the arts and music. At present, it is impossible to give these people what they expect and what they deserve. There are constant day-to-day frustrations, obstacles, challenges that are impossible to solve for lack of space. I have seen Greenwich High School brass quintets practicing in the hallways, and I have attended a master class where a visiting solo violinist told our string ensemble students that it was impossible for them to bow properly because they were sitting too close to each other. The conditions are pathetic and shameful. We have the finest, most dedicated music teachers here that any district could have boast of, but we are struggling daily trying to cope with serious instructional problems. As for the auditorium, I'm sure you all know that it does not accommodate the percentage of high school students that is dictated by the state. The auditorium renovation some years ago did not solve its very significant problems: heating, air conditioning, storage space, etc. A new auditorium will make a huge difference for our students and for professional performing groups. I beg you to support this effort, so immensely important to the continued excellence of our high school, which I'm devoted to in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Erickson, to be followed by Jenny Crow.
Good evening, members of town meeting and guests. My name is Laura Erickson, and though I currently serve as one of the 2 Greenwich High School PTA co-presidents and am privileged to advocate on behalf of students and staff, tonight I'm speaking as an individual and from the perspective of having previously served 6.5 terms as an RTM member. Tonight, I urge you to vote against the motion to delete the MISA line item. This project has followed the rigor of the town CIP process for the last 5 years. The building committee has been working tirelessly for the last 4 years. It's time to move this project forward and allow the committee to get bids. Further delay is costly for the bottom line of the project and also for Greenwich students and staff. For those in this room who are in favor of MISA but would like to know more about field remediation costs, I ask you to consider that there is no means to distinguish your vote this evening from those that are against the project or would seek to downsize the project. Approval of a motion to delete the item would be devastating as well as costly. I understand the desire to have more information, but you need to make the best decision tonight with the information we have. The field remediation should be considered a separate project, much like GEMS became a separate project from the police and fire facility. The BET has taken prudent steps to address the field remediation costs, and all parties are working cooperatively towards a long-term plan with minimal disruption to a campus which houses 3,000 on a school day and hundreds of athletes, coaches, and spectators. When families are faced with unexpected costs, my belief is that they work together and scrape and do whatever it takes to invest in their children, and that's what I'm asking for you to do tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Crow, to be followed by Angela Highland.
Mr. Moderator, members, guests, it was 4 years ago that I last came to the podium on this project. At that time, we were voting on funding for architectural and engineering. I'd venture to say that this is the most vetted capital project in the town's capital plan. There have been 15 affirmative votes by the Board of Education, the CIP, the BET, and the RTM, not including all the approvals necessary through the planning and zoning process. MISA was specifically mentioned in the town's 2009 POCD. The building committee was formed and has been faithfully issuing quarterly reports to the RTM, 16 of them to date. More than 4,700 residents of town signed petitions. Actually, we have more than 6,000 signatures, but we took out all the people that signed twice, so these are unique residents. All districts are represented. Every single district in town is represented. The RTM voted to reaffirm the municipal improvement by voting down an appeal. The campaign for MISA, and I'm sure that you'll hear from them, secured pledges for private funding to support this project. This is unprecedented. No other high school in Fairfield County has done so. I'm one of the 2 RTM members who attend BET Budget Committee operating and capital reviews, and I've done that for 6 years. What I have seen is careful and consistent attention to the financial model and to capital planning. I've seen adoption of new policies on debt and fund balance that provide external constraints and parameters to the management of the budget. I've seen responsible and conservative approach to the management of town spending. The funding request before us is $12 million. 75% of the capital budget is in other projects. The amount represented for this MISA line item is a fraction of the amount we spend on employee benefits annually and a tiny fraction of the total budget. As Mike Wysick said earlier, why pick MISA to delete? We've debated and decided the merits of this project. I believe the proposed budget with the conditions of release that were crafted by the BET represent a reasonable and prudent way to go forward. It allows the building committee to get bids on the project and get in the queue for state funding while maintaining control over any further spending through the BET conditions.
30 seconds.
I hope you will join me in voting no on the motion to delete. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Highland, to be followed by Lisa Beth Savitz.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow RTM members and guests. My name is Angela Highland. I'm with District 7. I'm also Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. I stand to express my reasons why the RTM should support this resolution to delete the $12.215 million appropriation from the MISA project. While we've been told many times this project was overwhelmingly approved by a wide margin, and that is true, recent events have made it imperative that we reevaluate the project as currently defined and to determine if this represents the best use of town resources going forward. Many municipalities today are confronted with funding projects where there is an express need. Yes, the auditorium needs upgrading. However, need doesn't always translate into demand for any specific project, especially once the changing circumstances and available resources are considered. At a minimum, we're looking at about $50 million allocation to this high school site. That's $37 million for MISA, plus a realistic amount for remediation costs. However, we all know these costs could escalate from there. And the arguments of potentially losing a few $1 million from the state matching funds, or the escalation in construction costs, or even sunk costs, what we've already spent to date, are, in my opinion, all overshadowed by the magnitude of this project. The uncertainty surrounding MISA at least raises the possibility that this project will substantially exceed an acceptable funding level. I might add that my objection at this time is not strictly because of the remediation cost, although they are a significant concern. The refusal on the part of the Board of Education to even consider a redesign of this facility, given the limitations of this site, demonstrates a lack of civic cooperation that we should all find troubling. The RTM should wait until further clarity on remediation cost, and on a parallel track, the Board of Ed should be focused on designing a less costly alternative. In this environment, capital projects must represent the best value for money possible and demonstrate unquestionable benefits for the majority of the town's stakeholders.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Lisa Beth Savitz, to be followed by Jim Bonney.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and other town officials. I am Lisa Beth Savitz, President of Greenwich PTA Council, and with me are some of our council's vice presidents, Jill Marchak, Sophie Dowling, and Jane Hentman. Last week, we emailed you a letter to express the preponderance of PTA support for the education budgets, including the MISA renovation capital item. Rather than reiterate our reasoning, in deference to your time tonight, copies of the letter are available on the table outside. We respectfully encourage you to appropriate the MISA funds now as the more prudent fiscal course, maximizing efficiency and minimizing disruption to the students, teachers, and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Jim Bonney, to be followed by Betsy Fruman.
Hi. So, I'm pretty much of a straight talker. I'm not going to sing or play any instruments for you. Thank you. You know, a couple years ago, we had a report in the BOC of this unknown quantity, possibly $100 million to fix the sewers. And we didn't stop every capital project because we have an unknown sewer bill, you know. I just honestly, to me, when you have a majority of 2/3 vote that want this done, and when I say a majority, and I understand that some people said there were special interests, there's 8,869 students in the town of Greenwich. They all have two parents, or most of them, and brothers and sisters that may not be in the school yet. I don't think that's a special interest group. I think that's our constituents that trust us to represent them in the RTM and do things that they want us to do. And one of the things that they obviously want us to do is build MISA. Whether it's the sewer company or the sewer project that's an unknown $100 million project in the future, or fields that are need to be remediated, I don't see the difference. I mean, it's a cost of living. It's a cost of doing business, of running a town. You have costs that come unexpectedly. We got to pay for it. A couple points. Let's see. One of the things that I mentioned at the Budget Overview Committee meeting was I asked a member of the BET, I said, how much did it cost? I see right here in the report, it cost $860,000 for 12 months delay of the project, from the last 12-month delay since it has been delayed. $860,000. What'll it cost to delay it another year? They told me at least that, probably $1 million to delay it another year. What if we just cut it out and don't do it? $5 million, I was told. We're going to be on the hook for $5 million and end up with nothing. So I don't see, I mean, I honestly think this is going to pass tonight, and this is just a colossal waste of time. So I would move that I would suggest, I can't move, but I would just suggest that we make this quick and get the vote done already, because no one's going to change their mind. They already have it set. Think about the people you represent and just vote for the people you represent and not whatever myopic view you might have of the thing. Okay, thank you.
Betsy Fruman, to be followed by Tom Cornelius.
Hard to follow that. I'm Betsy Fruman from District 9, and I only have two things to say. For 10 years, one of my volunteer activities was taking people through the high school. People who were going to move to town, who were thinking of leaving the private schools for the public schools. And the big downfall was our auditorium, our music space, how big is your chorus, where do they fit. This was 25 years ago, and we still have that same situation. The time is now. The other point I want to make is that the Environmental Protection Agency, we have been told, will work with us over a period of years. This Chicken Little, the sky is falling, that's not true. We have time. We can do it slowly at a financial cost that we can absorb.
Thank you. Tom Cornelius, to be followed by Jessica Brockington.
Good evening. I'm Tom Cornelius, the chairman of District 3, and I rise in support of MISA. I've been apprehensive about the vote and how to fund the money, but I wasn't separating. The remediation of the fields is a separate issue from the MISA project, and that's where I had my trouble separating both of them. Why don't we delay, if we're going to use that line and that reasoning, then we should delay all capital projects until we find out the cost of what the MISA project is going to bring to us. That would be the same what we're saying anyway, but why are we piggybacking it onto the MISA project? I don't think that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Brockington, to be followed by Pam Spear.
Good evening. Personally, I'm struggling with this. I was a fundraiser for the New York Philharmonic. You may know it's the country's oldest symphony, and it performs in arguably the country's worst symphonic space. When Avery Fisher Hall opened 50 years ago, it was acoustically dead. It hasn't changed. I understand the heartache. I do. However, the cost of this project has escalated continually, even prior to the discovery of the environmental hazards. And according to Bob Brady, who came to our District 2 meeting last Wednesday, the additional $7 million that we're setting aside right now is a guesstimate. We don't know. Right now, we have no way of knowing the additional cost of making this space safe for our children. Quite honestly, from a town budgetary perspective, my strong inclination is to delete MISA from the budget this year. Let's do the cleanup, take it up again when it's financially appropriate. And from a school budgetary perspective, I'd rather see this kind of emphasis placed on math and sciences, disciplines which would prepare our children for the local industries that have allowed this town to even consider such a luxury. Thank you.
Moderator, point of information.
Mr. Boutel, please state your point of information.
Knowledge of the body, how many speakers are remaining and how many of those would be opposed versus in favor?
All right, I have been conferring with the chair of the Board of Ed, who has suggested that we allow those who have signed up opposing the appropriation, in other words, in favor of the motion, to delete an opportunity to speak, and I will alternate one-to-one, which I have not been doing because of the greater number of MISA supporters. And there remain 1, 2, 3, it looks like 5 individuals against the MISA appropriation remaining to speak. So that would be a total of 10 people, and then one of the MISA supporters would move the previous question. There are many more. You know, I told you there were over 50 MISA supporters. We have only gone through a total of 20 speakers or so at the moment. So, were we at Pam Spear? Is that right? Okay, Pam Spear, to be followed by J.J. Andrews.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and members of the RTM. My name is Pam Spear, and I'm a co-chair, along with Andrea Aaron, of Friends of High School Performing Arts. We are a community group founded over 5 years ago to advocate for quality facilities for curricular performing arts at Greenwich High School. We stand before you tonight as representatives of the 4,755 Greenwich residents Jenny mentioned who have signed our petition supporting MISA. The new auditorium has been carefully designed by the building committee you all appointed, approved by the Board of Ed, and vetted by town agencies. It will meet state standards and will be comparable to school auditoriums in neighboring towns and cities. MISA will also address the desperate need for properly sized music classrooms, along with storage and practice spaces. The town must provide an appropriate learning environment for all its students at our one public high school. The BET has approved a budget and developed a long-range plan that can accommodate MISA and future remediation work. Please support MISA and vote no on the motion to delete MISA from the 2012-13 budget. Thank you.
Yes. All right, J.J. Andrews, to be followed by Ann Wichman. Is J.J. Andrews here? No? All right, Nancy Burke, District 2. You're in favor of deleting? But you're not going to speak? Okay. How about Carl Anderson? Is Carl Anderson here? To be followed by Ann Wichman.
Good evening. Good evening, moderator, members of the RTM, and guests. My name is Carl Anderson. I have lived in town for 40 years. I graduated Greenwich High School in 1976, and my oldest son is graduating in June. Between my environmental and construction backgrounds, I have 23 years of experience. For now, I am against the construction of MISA. I believe we must put it off until the economy improves and money frees up. Then we can go ahead with the work. In the meantime, the hazardous waste should be cleaned up as much as possible, and improvements should be made to the existing structure. One of the main issues of the existing music department is space. Since space is so tight, why not move a couple of the science and chemistry classes upstairs to lease trailers outside? If you have to knock out some walls to make the classrooms larger and soundproof them, so be it. I understand that the HVAC system is so loud that it interferes with practices. How about looking into quiet running fans and slim air conditioners? There was a picture in last Thursday's Greenwich Time of the auditorium from the stage looking out. One could visibly see the scratch marks on what looks like a wood floor. How much would it cost to sand and refinish the floors? $10,000, $15,000 maybe? In essence, as far as this topic is concerned, any qualified construction company can do this work, and most likely other items would be added to a punch list. How much could it cost? Maybe a few $1,000,000, if that. I would like to say at this point that we need to ask ourselves, are these students young men and women, or are they kids? There has been decades of students going through the music department. They have learned and gone through life no worse for the wear because they practiced and played in the music department. In closing, I would like to reiterate that I am not against building MISA. I am against building it now in this economy, which will inevitably increase our taxes, especially in light of the cleanup of the hazardous waste. In the meantime, we can improve what currently exists to make it better for the music students at Greenwich High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Wichman, to be followed by Frank Pozluzny.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, I'm Ann Wichman, and I'm in my third term as a representative from District 5. This is the first time that I've spoken before this group, and I'm doing it because I am so passionate about the need for a MISA project. I taught in the Greenwich school system for many years. My children went to Greenwich schools, and I have grandchildren in the school system. But I stand before you tonight as a long-term Greenwich resident and taxpayer. You've heard many reasons why MISA is so needed by our children, so I have no need to repeat those compelling arguments. This is really about the character of the town in which these children are growing up and how we set our priorities. In Greenwich, we're blessed to have a fine symphony and outstanding choral society. Our adult musicians, as well as our children, deserve a decent facility, and our choral society won't even consider performing in our present substandard high school auditorium. They go to Norwalk to perform, and this is shameful. I've always been proud of living and working in Greenwich, and I hate to end on such a negative note. But as an RTM member, I will be embarrassed if this group, in such a wealthy and privileged town, turns away from something as vital as the MISA project and allows our high school auditorium to remain dysfunctional and inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank Posluzny, to be followed by Jane Arnone.
Good evening. I would like to express a concern that I understand and appreciate the needs and the wants of 1,000 students at the Greenwich High School, but I also want to respect and really bring into consideration the other 2,000 students at the Greenwich High School. What we're dealing here with is a site that has a contamination issue that particularly affects MISA at this current moment. But what we don't know is how contaminated is the overall site that can affect future ability to develop, expand, moderate, maintain the facility we have. This facility has served us for 42 years. It's going to need upgrades, it's going to need maintenance, and it may need expansion of other facilities to suit some of the needs of the other 2,000 students at the school. I would like to have a clearer understanding of the extent of the remediation and contaminated issue of the entire site, not just the site affected by the MISA development program in this project, but the site's viability for its future applications for the needs of our community as a high school unit. That's what I'd like to understand more deeply before we go further. To feel that we can always afford everything that comes in front of us is not true, simply not true. I've taken 6.5 months to get dangerous branches that have fallen from the October storm removed over sidewalks next to our public schools. And I'm holding the cover of the New York Times today, which is discussing fatalities and casualties in New York City as a result of their reduced services for tree maintenances. Now, we've had a reduction in some of the Service Corps people in our town through attrition, but that's affected our safety and our services available to us. We do not just always have money to replace services and pay millions of dollars here when we don't have tens of thousands of dollars over there for things we also need. I appreciate and respect the need for this auditorium, but I think until we have a clear financial view of the overall site, it would be fiscally foolish and irresponsible to go forward at this point.
Thank you. Jane Arnone, to be followed by Karen Fosliotis.
Hi, I'm Jane Arnone from District 9. Despite my drawl, I'm going to try to speak fast. I rise to speak tonight in opposition to the pending motion and in support of MISA, a project that I believe has been long overdue since I was a Greenwich High School student back in the late 70s. I'm dating myself. That's terrible. I've just taken a quick poll. Who of you here have actually played or learned or performed at Greenwich High School, the auditorium, the music spaces? Band people. Okay, well, that was me. I mean, if you did, then you would understand the large amount of need there is to proceed with the remediation. I distinctly remember when I first came to Greenwich High School in September of '76. I was a North Carolina transplant. I walked in the building. I walked into the student center and saw that and thought, wow, this looks like a college. Where am I, you know? And then asked with my flute in hand, asked someone, well, okay, where's the band room? They point me down the hallway to the direction of the band room. I walk in and I said, come on, you're kidding me, right? I had come from what I consider to be a relic junior high school in North Carolina, not the Greenwich school district of any means. And it was basically the same or a worse band room than where I'd just come from playing the flute. I was just like, really? And the thing is, it's still that way. It's my understanding, and I haven't been there lately, but it's still almost the exact same as when I was a flute player and then a French horn player in the high school. Cramped then we wore hideous wool uniforms that we used to pass out in the cramped spaces, but I've heard that it's not too much better. Then you get onto the auditorium. That almost was worse to play in at the time. The sound was always muddy. I could never hear what I was doing. I was always crashing my French horn into anybody else who was sitting around me. Just not a good place to learn to play and to play. It's the orchestra in any kind of performance didn't have an orchestra pit, still doesn't make sense. Didn't make sense now. It doesn't make sense then. Obviously, the experience that I had as a student leads me to stand up and support the program, to support MISA. I question the current tactics of the people who are now raising a separate remediation issue that doesn't have anything to do with MISA other than it's in the sort of vicinity of MISA, who used to be opposing, who did oppose the project, who still oppose it, and are now raising the remediation as a reason to kill it. It doesn't make sense, and it didn't make sense then. It makes no sense tonight. I also find it incredible that the GHS
20
students
seconds.
who still have to deal with the problems that I did. How many years later? I don't even want to say because I think it's depressing. I have a daughter that's starting at the high school next year. She's a fantastic flute player. I hope that she will have the benefit of playing in a much better place than I did at Greenwich High School. Thanks.
Thank you. Karen Fosley-Otis to be followed by Neil Greeley.
Good evening, RTM members. It's good to be back. Your vote to support the motion to delete tonight is not, as the proponents for MISA have stated, a vote as to whether you support or do not support MISA, or to change the priority of the project or its need. Your vote to support the motion to delete is not to support the so-called fiscal hawks that a few in this body and in the press have labeled those who have dared to ask questions about this project, including District 7. Your vote to support the motion to delete is not a vote against a promise made or against supporting our talented students who require a quality facility. Your vote to support the motion to delete is not a vote as to whether you trust or do not trust the BET or their plan to manage the fiscal affairs of the building of this capital project. But here is what your vote to support the motion to delete is. Your vote to support the motion to delete is about allowing the tax-paying public a continued voice in future financial decisions about MISA after the EPA decision is made known to the town and the Board of Ed consultant weighs in on potential costs of remediation. Your vote to support the motion to delete is about allowing the RTM to have a continued voice in concert with the Board of Ed and the BET as to whether what is finally spent on MISA makes fiscal sense without sacrificing a quality facility. Your vote to support the motion to delete will ensure that the costs of this project become ridiculously inflated. There will be a process to allow for public input as to what is ultimately built. Your vote to support the motion to delete is about assuring that the system of checks and balances that the RTM is a part of in our town's government is intact, and that this body does not bend to the will of special interest groups to be merely a rubber stamp. Your vote to support the motion to delete will allay the fears of a large number of taxpayers, and believe me, there are a large number, that remediation of MISA, which has not yet been signed off by the EPA, and the adjoining fields will not become a bottomless pit requiring additional appropriations that will have to be approved without debate because there is nothing left that can be done to manage these costs. Just as was done by the RTM 2 years ago with the vote to modify the budget for the Central Fire Station, voting to support the motion to delete means that MISA will simply be postponed, not deleted, until the RTM is satisfied with the cost. I ask you to be the fiscal stewards that this body is charged with being and vote to postpone MISA by voting yes to support the motion to delete the capital funds for MISA.
Thank you. Neil Greeley to be followed by Carl Carlson.
Mr. Moderator and members of the RTM, my name is Neil Greeley.
I'm one of the 3 co-presidents of the Campaign for MISA, Inc. I think you may know the Campaign for MISA, Inc. is a not-for-profit founded in 2011 for the express purpose of raising private funds to help defray the cost of the MISA project for the town. Libby Florin and Lyle Gibbons are the honorary co-chairs of the campaign. They are supported by 27 members of the campaign committee. To follow up on something someone said before, I'm now here to show you the money, at least part of it. I'm happy to report that over $1,220,000 has been pledged for the purpose of defraying the cost of MISA to date, as a result of the efforts of these dedicated volunteers. We're grateful for the generosity of our donor group. The success of this quiet phase of the campaign fundraising, I think, demonstrates the broad and energetic support for the MISA project in the Greenwich community. We anticipate raising additional funds to further reduce the cost of MISA project to the town. At such time as the RTM approves the remaining funding required for MISA and the BET releases these funds, the campaign intends to launch the public phase of our fundraising, which would focus on the sale of naming rights for auditorium seats. We ask you to support MISA by voting no on the motion and keeping the $12 million appropriation for MISA. Thank you for your time, your service, and your patience.
Thank you. Carl Carlson, to be followed by Nancy Weissler.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, I think many people here know me as Carl Carlson, born in Greenwich over 62 years ago, Greenwich High School graduate of class of 67, but graduated a little bit earlier. In my youth, I took a bachelor's degree in chemistry with high distinction. I was a good chemist. My friend John Doogie has talked to me about some of the chemicals that were found there. I don't like these chemicals at all. My own feeling on the whole business is that we should delete the money for the MISA, take that money and a lot more money, and get the polluted soil off of the high school area quickly, and that we should do this all at once. I think it is most important that you put the health of the children first. I think we will find out what EPA says about this pretty soon. But the chemicals they found have been in the phenol family, the aromatics. And my view of these are probably some of the worst things you can have for carcinogens. What you should do is clean this place up all at once. It'd be best if you deleted the money for the MISA, took that money, borrowed money or whatever. If you could truck all that dirt out over the summer, whatever it costs, it would be the best thing you could do in the situation. The real problem is the polluted soil around that high school. That is critical. A music auditorium could wait for 1 year. Thank you.
All right. Nancy, before I recognize Nancy Weissler, this is at the suggestion of the Board of Education that a supporter, we now have run through the list of all individuals who signed up to speak against the MISA appropriation. There are many more supporters on the list. And at the suggestion of the Board of Ed, which I believe is a good one, Nancy Weissler is prepared to make a motion for the previous question, which is a motion to cut off debate. But prior to recognizing her, I'm going to read the list of individuals who have signed up to speak, and then I will call upon Ms. Weissler. Those remaining on the list: Nancy Chapin, Stephen Meskers, Bob Luce, Catherine Prokop, Lori Heiss, Nancy Weissler herself, Steve Orzoa, Lauren Rabin, Valerie Erdy, Christine Edwards, Adam Savitz, Alan Jackson, Colette Rogers, Tim Oberweger, Greg Schulte, Nancy Chapin, and some of these may be duplicates. Michael Carter, Kate Hobart, Josh Brown, Eric Aaron, Sam Brown, that's not it, but Clara Aizayaga, Audrey Scher, Emma Fountain, Kristen Moore, Tess Brown. Those, I believe, are all the names, and Jennifer Meredith. Nancy Weisler. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to cut off debate and proceed to vote on the pending motion to delete the $12+ million for the MISA project. The motion for the previous question is not itself debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. If you are in favor of proceeding to vote on the motion to amend and not to hear additional speakers, you should vote in favor of this motion for the previous question. If you would like to continue debate, you should vote no. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. All right, I will now call for the vote on the motion to delete $12 million, I believe it's $215,000 that was offered on behalf of 4 of our districts. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Motion to delete. This is code 680-956-13163. Motion to delete $12,215,000. While we are voting, we can continue with the business of the meeting. Mr. Goss.
Just to clarify, yes, delete.
Yes. A vote yes on this motion to delete is to take that money out of our budget. No is a vote to keep that money in our budget. If you want to take it out, vote yes. If you want to keep it in, vote no. I will continue going through our codes. We left off on page 12 of our budget document. After the vote is tallied and I announce it, if there is a need to come back for any reason to that item, I would entertain any such suggestion. All right. Any other motions directed to 680 Board of Education capital projects? This is on page 12. Moving along, 701 Greenwich Library, 710 Perrott Library, 817 Parks and Rec Western Civic Center, 822 Parks, Playgrounds and Fields, 832 Marine Maintenance, 833 Beaches, 834 Harbors and Boating Facilities, 999 Fixed Charges. That concludes capital projects. That brings us to Sewer Maintenance Fund. 361 DPW Sewer Maintenance, 361 Sewer Improvement. 219 Parking Services, 318 DPW Highway Traffic Engineering, 670 School Lunch, 317 DPW Highway Parking, 450 Nathaniel Witherell, 824 Harris Golf Course. And the final code is 131, Other Post-Employment Benefits. All right. That now brings us to our budget resolutions. Mr. Bergweger, I believe you had some motions addressed to those budget resolutions. I'm now beginning on page 21. Kip Bergweger, Vice Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
At the Legislative and Rules Committee meeting on Monday, we were helped on this by Mr. Raymer of the BET. The delegate from District 5 had carefully reviewed the budget resolutions and identified a number of questions. Mr. Raymer had convened a committee or a group of town officials, including people from the BET, the Law Department, the town, and other town departments. And we reviewed these questions, and most of them were answered satisfactorily, but a few of them were not, and that led to our recommending amendments to certain of the resolutions. The first resolution is resolution number 12. Under this, the first selectman is authorized to accept proceeds from the use of town facilities. Now that is very similar to resolutions 44E and 44.8, which deal with rental of town facilities, but those resolutions provide for disposition of the proceeds, whereas resolution 12 did not. So we moved a vote of 1100 to amend resolution 12 by adding at the end of it the words, "for the purpose of reimbursing the approved costs related to the rental of town facilities." And by the way, all of these changes were in my report, which I hope was distributed to every member of the RTM, so you should have had a chance to look at these. Resolutions 19 and 24 had some clarity issues, so we voted 1100 to amend resolution 19. The first line has the word monies, plural. We changed that to money, singular, and then saying not exceeding $5,000, and inserted the words per donor per fiscal year. And we made the same changes in resolution 24. Finally, there were 3 resolutions which had scrivener errors. The first is resolution 11, in which we have the term federal government, but the word government does not have a capital G, which is the proper way of referring to the federal government. So we moved to capitalize G in government. Resolution 40 had in the last part of the lines had the words "the comptroller shall" to the appropriate account. We moved to insert the word "add," so it says the comptroller shall add to the appropriate account. And in resolution 44A, there had been a deletion of the word "such proceeds shall become appropriations," that, and the word "that" should also have been deleted but wasn't, so we moved to amend it by deleting the word "that." And all of these were approved 1100, and I have copies for the...
Thank you. That motion to amend being offered on behalf of our Legislative and Rules Committee does not require a second and is currently before us. Is there any need to reread those proposed amendments? Hearing none, we can adopt motions to amend by unanimous consent. Is there any objection to the Legislative and Rules motion to amend the budget resolution? Hearing none, that motion to amend is adopted upon unanimous consent. All right, are there any further motions addressed to the budget resolutions? Hearing none, that now brings us to the end of our budget, which is item 3 on our call. We will await the result of the vote on the motion to delete the MISA funds before proceeding to take up a vote on the budget as amended or not. So at this point, we will stand in recess until we have the results of that vote. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will once again come to order. We have the results of the vote on the motion to delete the MISA funds. Those in favor, 65. Opposed, 137. Abstaining, 2. That motion has failed. Are there any further motions to be addressed to the Board of Education capital account? Hearing none, we are now ready to take a vote on the budget as amended, and those amendments were limited to the budget resolution language. Once again, I remind our members that the RTM is charged with adopting a budget, And if there were a majority no vote, the RTM would have failed to adopt the budget, and the recommended budget as presented by the BET would take effect. So will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 3, budget as amended for fiscal year 2012-2013. And please poll your members. We will need to await the result of that vote before proceeding to adjourn the meeting. We have the result of the vote on item number 3, which is the budget for fiscal year 2012-2013 as amended. Those in favor, 183. Opposed, 17. Abstaining, 1. The budget has been adopted. That being the final item to come before the meeting, the meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.